Ethan Cole stood frozen on the corner of 5th and Madison, his heart hammering against his ribs as a woman in an expensive gray suit crumpled to the pavement 15 feet ahead. Traffic screamed past. His phone buzzed. Interview in 12 minutes. The most important meeting of his life waited 17 floors above him, and this stranger was bleeding onto the concrete between him and everything his daughter needed. He had exactly one choice to make, and both options would destroy him. If you've ever had to choose between doing what's right and saving everything you love, stay with me until the end of this story. Drop a like and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this reaches. The morning had started with promise, which should have been Ethan's first warning. In his experience, hope was just the universe's way of setting up the punchline. He'd ironed his only interview shirt the night before, the blue one without the frayed collar, and laid it across the back of the kitchen chair like it was made of something more valuable than clearance rack cotton. His daughter Mia had watched him from the doorway of their studio apartment, her 7-year-old face serious in the way that broke his heart every single time. "Is this the good job, Daddy?" she'd asked. Ethan had knelt down to her level, straightening the collar of her school uniform, even though it didn't need straightening. "This is the one, sweetheart. Operations coordinator at Morgan & Associates. Real salary, real benefits, the kind of health insurance that covers your inhaler without me having to choose between that and groceries." Mia had nodded solemnly, like she understood exactly what he meant. She probably did. Kids who grew up in 400-square-foot apartments with fathers who worked 3 part-time jobs learn to understand things they shouldn't have to. "You're going to get it," she'd said with the absolute certainty only children possess, "because you're the best." Now 12 hours later, Ethan stood outside the Morgan & Associates building with 11 minutes until his interview and a stranger's blood on his hands. Literally. The woman had appeared out of nowhere, stumbling from between 2 parked cars directly into the path of a delivery truck. Ethan had seen it happen in the strange, slow-motion clarity that accompanies moments when everything changes. She'd pitched forward, her expensive leather briefcase flying from her grip, one heel breaking as she fell. The truck driver had slammed the brakes, but physics didn't care about panic. She'd gone down hard, her head glancing off the chrome bumper with a sound Ethan would hear in his nightmares. He'd moved without thinking, which was probably the only reason he'd moved at all. Thinking would have reminded him about the interview. Thinking would have whispered about Mia's inhaler prescription that was due for refill next week. Thinking would have calculated the exact cost of this moment of humanity. "Don't move," Ethan said, crouching beside her. His hand shook as he pulled off his jacket, wadding it up to cushion her head. "You hit pretty hard. Just stay still." The woman's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy. She was maybe 40, with short dark hair now matted with blood from a gash above her left temple. Her gray suit probably cost more than Ethan's monthly rent. A thin gold wedding band caught the morning light. "My briefcase," she mumbled. "Meeting. I have a—" "Your briefcase is fine. You're not fine. We need to get you checked out." She tried to sit up, and Ethan gently pressed her shoulder back down. Around them, the morning rush continued its indifferent flow. A few people slowed to look. Most didn't. New York had taught everyone that other people's emergencies were none of their business. "I'm calling 911, Ethan said, reaching for his phone. "No." Her hand shot out with surprising strength, gripping his wrist. Her eyes had cleared somewhat, focusing on him with intensity that made him pause. "No ambulance. Just help me to 900 Madison, 17th floor, please." Ethan glanced at the building behind them, the same building where his interview waited, where his future waited, where everything he'd worked toward for the past 3 years condensed into a single 45-minute meeting that was now 8 minutes away. "You need medical attention," he said. "You could have a concussion." "I have something more important than a concussion." She gripped his arm tighter. "I have a room full of people waiting for me to make decisions that affect their livelihoods. Please, just help me upstairs." There it was again. Choice dressed up as urgency, asking him to pick between a stranger's needs and his own survival. Ethan looked at her face, really looked, and saw something he recognized in the set of her jaw, the desperation poorly masked by determination. He saw himself, every morning for the past 3 years, pushing through exhaustion and fear because other people depended on him. He saw Mia's face when she tried to hide her wheezing because she knew the inhaler cost money they didn't have. "Okay, he heard himself say. But if you pass out on the way, I'm calling the paramedics and you can't stop me. Relief flooded her features. Deal. Getting her to her feet took precious minutes. She leaned heavily on Ethan, one heel gone, her expensive suit torn at the shoulder. Blood still seeped from the gash on her head, soaking into his wadded jacket. They made it through the revolving doors into the marble lobby, and Ethan felt the temperature-controlled air hit him like accusation. 5 minutes until his interview. 17th floor, the woman said again, and Ethan guided her toward the elevators. They rode up in silence. The woman leaned against the elevator wall, eyes closed, breathing carefully. Ethan watched the floor numbers climb and felt his chance at stability descend in inverse proportion. 14th floor, 15th, 16th. Thank you, the woman said quietly, not opening her eyes. I know this is costing you something. I can see it on your face. You don't know anything about me, Ethan replied more sharply than he intended. I know you stopped when everyone else kept walking. I know you're wearing an interview shirt with perfect creases, and you keep checking your watch like every second is borrowed time. I know you chose to help me anyway. She opened her eyes, looking at him directly. That tells me everything I need to know. The elevator chimed, 17th floor. The doors opened onto chaos, a reception area done in steel and glass, with at least 20 people in business attire moving with the controlled panic of a disrupted schedule. A woman in her 50s looked up from a desk, and her face went pale. Miss Morgan, she gasped, rushing toward them. What happened? We've been calling. The board meeting started 10 minutes ago. Everyone's asking. I'm fine, Patricia. Just a small accident. Is the conference room ready? Yes, but you need... What I need is 5 minutes to clean up, and then we start. Have we heard from the 2 o'clock operations coordinator interview? Ethan's stomach dropped through the floor. Patricia glanced at her computer screen. No call, no show. He was scheduled for... She looked up, checking the wall clock. 3 minutes ago. Cancel it, Miss Morgan said, still leaning on Ethan. Add a note that we don't hire people who can't respect our time. Wait, Ethan said, the word escaping before wisdom could stop it. I'm Ethan Cole. I'm the 2 o'clock interview. Both women turned to stare at him. Patricia's expression shifted from concern to confusion to something like disgust. Miss Morgan's face remained unreadable. You're the interview, she said slowly, and instead of being on time, you were... Helping you, Ethan finished. I saw you get hit. I couldn't just walk past. The silence stretched like taffy, sticky and uncomfortable. Around them, the office seemed to hold its breath. Ethan could feel his future slipping away like water through cupped hands, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Patricia, Miss Morgan said finally, please call Dr. Silverman. Tell him I need him to make a house call to my office in 30 minutes. She turned to Ethan. And cancel the operations coordinator interview. Yes, ma'am, Patricia said, relief evident in her voice. But first, add a note to Mr. Cole's file. Not about him missing the interview, about what he did instead. Patricia's fingers paused over her keyboard. What note would you like me to add? Miss Morgan looked at Ethan, and something shifted in her expression that he couldn't quite read. Right, candidate sacrificed professional opportunity to assist injured stranger, demonstrated immediate assessment, calm decision-making under pressure, and priority management when confronted with competing urgent needs. Physical risk assessment and crisis response exceptional. Recommend immediate consideration for any position requiring judgment under pressure. I don't understand, Ethan said. The board meeting can wait 15 minutes. You're going to help me to my office, then you're going to sit in our lobby while I make myself presentable enough that my board doesn't spend the whole meeting demanding I go to the hospital. Then Patricia is going to bring you to conference room B, where you're going to have your interview with our hiring manager, exactly as scheduled. It will be 45 minutes late, but it will happen. After you already demonstrated more practical operations coordination than most people manage in a formal interview, yes. Ms. Morgan's voice carried steel underneath the fatigue. I built this company on the principle that who you are matters more than how you present yourself. You just proved who you are. Now let's find out if your skills match your character. Ethan's throat tightened. I thought doing the right thing meant I lost my shot. In a lot of places it would, Miss Morgan pushed away from the wall, standing straighter despite the blood still trickling down her face. But not here. Not today. Now, are you going to keep arguing, or are you going to help me to my office so you can make your interview? I'll help you, Ethan said. Good. Let's see if you can make two good choices in one morning. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Ethan helped Ms. Morgan to a corner office that looked like it had been designed by someone who believed in authority and good taste in equal measure. Patricia appeared with a first aid kit and a cool efficiency that suggested this wasn't her first emergency. Within minutes, Miss Morgan's head wound was cleaned and bandaged, her torn jacket replaced with a fresh one from what Patricia called the emergency closet, and her composure restored to something approaching normal. You can wait in reception, Ms. Morgan told Ethan. Patricia will bring you back when we're ready. And Mr. Cole? Breathe. You've already passed the hard part. Ethan returned to the reception area and collapsed into one of the sleek chairs that probably cost more than his security deposit. His hands still shook. His shirt, he noticed, had blood on the cuff. His jacket was somewhere in Miss Morgan's office, too stained to be saved. He looked like he'd been in a fight, felt like he'd run a marathon, and still had to somehow convince someone to give him a job. His phone buzzed. A text from Mia's after-school program supervisor. Mia asking if you got the job yet. She's very excited. Good luck. Ethan closed his eyes. The weight of everything pressed down like atmosphere, like gravity, like the accumulation of every choice that had led him to this moment. He'd been exactly here before, in different chairs and different lobbies, watching opportunities dissolve because life demanded he choose between advancement and survival. 3 years ago, when the layoffs hit his previous company, he'd been a junior project coordinator with a pregnant wife and a mortgage. Then Sarah died in childbirth, and the medical bills came, and the life insurance didn't cover half of what he owed. He'd lost the house, lost the career trajectory, lost everything except Mia and the grinding determination to build something better for her. Now he worked as a night custodian at an office building, a weekend delivery driver, and weekday mornings at a coffee shop that didn't ask questions about his availability. None of it paid well. None of it offered benefits. None of it gave Mia the stability she deserved or the future she needed. This job, operations coordinator at Morgan & Associates, represented everything he'd been fighting toward. Real salary, health insurance, normal hours. The kind of position where he could be home for dinner, help with homework, be the father Mia needed instead of the exhausted stranger who tucked her in and left for another shift. And he'd sacrificed his shot at it to help a bleeding stranger reach a meeting. Except somehow, impossibly, the stranger had given it back. Mr. Cole? Patricia appeared at his elbow. We're ready for you. Conference room B, just through here. Ethan stood, smoothing his stained shirt in a gesture he knew was futile. Thank you. Mr. Cole? Patricia's voice softened slightly. What you did this morning? Helping Miss Morgan? That matters here, more than you probably realize. Just be yourself in there. That's all you need to do. The conference room was smaller than he'd expected, more intimate. Windows overlooked Madison Avenue, where the morning rush had settled into the steady flow of midday traffic. A man in his 50s sat at the table, reviewing a folder that Ethan assumed was his application. Ethan Cole, the man said, standing to shake his hand. His grip was firm, professional. I'm David Chen, head of operations. Please, sit. And before we begin, I want to acknowledge that this morning has been unconventional, to say the least. That's one word for it, Ethan agreed. David smiled. Claire Morgan called me from her office 15 minutes ago. Interrupted my board meeting, actually, which she's never done before. She told me what happened, all of it. The accident, your response, your choice. I couldn't just walk past her, Ethan said. She was hurt. No, you couldn't. And that tells me something your resume can't. David leaned back in his chair, studying Ethan with the kind of attention that felt both uncomfortable and strangely validating. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask you the questions I had planned. You're going to answer them. We're going to have the interview you were supposed to have at 2 o'clock, and we're both going to pretend that the last 45 minutes didn't happen. Fair? Fair, Ethan agreed. Good. Then let's start with the obvious question. You've been out of project coordination for 3 years. Why come back now? Ethan had rehearsed this answer 100 times. He'd practiced delivering it with confidence, with optimism, with the careful balance of honesty and professional presentation. But sitting in this room, with blood on his cuff and his heart still hammering from the morning's chaos, the rehearsed version felt like a lie. "I have a 7-year-old daughter," he said instead. "She has asthma. She needs stability, health insurance, a father who's present instead of exhausted. For 3 years, I've been doing whatever work I could find to keep us afloat. Custodial, delivery, food service. Enough jobs that I never sleep and she never sees me. I need to give her better than that. I need to be better than that." David didn't write anything down. "That's honest. Tell me about the gap. What happened 3 years ago?" "My wife died during childbirth. Complications. The medical bills bankrupted us. I lost my position during company restructuring while I was on bereavement leave. By the time I was functional enough to job hunt properly, I had a newborn, debt, and no references, so I took what I could get." "I'm sorry," David said, and the words carried weight instead of empty courtesy. "That's a lot to survive." "Surviving isn't enough anymore. Mia deserves more than survival." "Agreed. So tell me what you remember about operations coordination. What did you love about it, and what did you hate?" The interview shifted into familiar territory. David asked about workflow management, crisis response, resource allocation, stakeholder communication. Ethan answered, drawing on memories 3 years old and skills he'd thought he'd lost. But he also drew on something else, the hundreds of small crises he'd managed in the past 3 years. Coordinating 3 work schedules around daycare hours, allocating limited resources between rent and food and medical care, communicating with creditors, supervisors, teachers, doctors, all while maintaining enough professional presentation to keep the jobs that kept them housed. He'd thought those years were wasted time, desperation disguised as employment. But in David's questions, he found the threads connecting his past to his present. The custodial work that taught him facility management, the delivery routes that honed his logistics thinking, the coffee shop that refined his crisis de-escalation when customers got aggressive. "Interesting," David said after nearly 30 minutes. "You've actually got more practical operations experience now than you did 3 years ago. It just doesn't look traditional on paper." "Most of my life doesn't look traditional on paper," Ethan admitted. "No, it doesn't, but traditional isn't always what we need." David closed the folder. "Last question, and I want you to really think about your answer. This morning, you made a choice that could have cost you this opportunity. If you could go back to that moment on the street, knowing what you know now, would you make a different choice?" Ethan thought about Mia's face when she'd said he was going to get the job because he was the best. He thought about the woman bleeding on the pavement, desperate to reach her meeting, to fulfill her responsibilities even while injured. He thought about the kind of man he wanted to be versus the kind of father circumstances demanded. "No," he said finally. "I wouldn't change it. If I'd walked past her to make this interview on time, I might have gotten the job. But I'd have proven I was the kind of person who puts professional advancement above human need. That's not who I want to be. That's not who I want my daughter to see when she looks at me." David nodded slowly. "Even if it meant losing this opportunity?" "Especially then. Because what I teach Mia by my choices matters more than any job. She needs stability, yes, but she needs a father with integrity more than she needs a father with a good salary. That's an expensive principle to maintain. It's the only one that matters." The silence that followed felt different than the awkward pause in the elevator. This was consideration, evaluation, the weight of decision settling into the space between them. "I'm going to be straight with you, Ethan," David said. "We had 12 candidates for this position. On paper, at least 6 of them have more recent experience, better credentials, more traditional career paths. If this was just about resume comparison, you probably wouldn't have made the final 3. Ethan's heart sank. "I understand. But I'm not finished. What happened this morning showed me something none of those other candidates could demonstrate in an interview. You made a decision under extreme pressure that cost you something significant. You prioritized correctly when everything was on the line. And you did it instinctively, without calculation. That's not something we can teach. So I'm recommending you for the position. Final decision is Claire's, Ms. Morgan's. But unless you somehow completely misrepresent yourself in the second interview, I think you're our candidate." The words took a moment to penetrate. When they did, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years, the solid ground of possibility beneath his feet. "Second interview?" he managed. "Standard procedure. You'll meet with Claire directly, probably early next week. She likes to personally approve all operations hires." David smiled. "Given this morning's introduction, I don't think you need to worry about making a good impression." "I don't know what to say." "Say yes. Say you want the job. Say you're ready to start rebuilding your career." "Yes," Ethan said. "To all of it. Yes." They shook hands again, and this time Ethan felt the gesture differently. Not as a conclusion, but as a beginning. As a door opening onto the life he'd been fighting toward for 3 years. David walked him to the elevator, gave him Patricia's direct number for scheduling the second interview, and sent him back down to the marble lobby where his morning had transformed. Ethan stepped onto Madison Avenue and let himself breathe properly for the first time since he'd seen that woman stumble into traffic. His phone rang. Mia's after-school program. "Mr. Cole? Just checking in. Mia's asking about the interview. Should I tell her anything specific?" Ethan looked up at the 17th floor windows, where somewhere behind glass and steel, his future was being written. "Tell her it went well. Tell her Daddy made the right choice. And tell her we're going to celebrate tonight with pizza from the place she likes." "The expensive place?" "The expensive place," Ethan confirmed. "We've earned it." He ended the call and started walking toward the subway, his blood-stained shirt hidden under his coat, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The morning had started with promise, which should have been his first warning. But maybe, just maybe, sometimes the universe wasn't setting up a punchline. Sometimes it was setting up a second chance. Behind him, 17 floors above the street, Claire Morgan stood at her window and watched Ethan Cole disappear into the lunchtime crowds. Her head throbbed where she'd hit the truck, and Dr. Silverman had been entirely too insistent about concussion protocols. But she'd sat through the board meeting, made the necessary decisions, and kept the company moving forward because that's what leaders did. And she'd watched David Chen's preliminary recommendation come through on her tablet with the kind of satisfaction that came from being proven right. "Patricia," she called, "clear my schedule for Tuesday morning, 2 hours. I want to personally interview Ethan Cole for the operations coordinator position." "Already done, Ms. Morgan, and I took the liberty of requesting his complete background file from HR." "His background file? You said who people are matters more than how they present themselves. I thought you'd want the full picture." Patricia handed over a slim folder, including the parts he didn't put on his resume. Claire opened it and started reading, and as the story unfolded, the dead wife, the medical bankruptcy, the 3 jobs, the single-parent struggle, her respect for the man who'd stopped to help her this morning shifted into something deeper. He hadn't just made a good choice. He'd made the same choice he'd been making every day for 3 years, prioritizing what mattered over what was easy. That kind of integrity didn't come from a moral victory. It came from being tested by life until character was all you had left. "Tuesday morning," Claire said again. "And Patricia, make a note in his file. This one matters." "They all matter, Miss Morgan." "Yes, but this one almost didn't happen because someone else might have walked past a stranger bleeding in the street. I want to make sure we're the kind of company that rewards the people who don't walk past, who stop, who choose right over easy." She looked down at the street again, where traffic flowed and people moved and life continued its indifferent rhythm. Somewhere in that flow, Ethan Cole was heading home to his daughter, probably not quite believing what had happened, probably still half convinced it would all fall apart. It wouldn't, Claire decided, not if she had anything to say about it. Because this morning, a stranger had stopped when everyone else kept walking. He'd chosen humanity over opportunity, integrity over advancement. And sometimes, just sometimes, the universe wasn't setting up a punchline. Sometimes it was setting up a reward. The subway ride home felt different than usual. Ethan sat in the same orange plastic seat he'd occupied 1,000 times before, surrounded by the same tired faces and flickering fluorescent lights. But something fundamental had shifted. The weight he'd carried for 3 years hadn't disappeared. It never would. But it had redistributed somehow, become bearable in a way it hadn't been that morning. He pulled out his phone and looked at the email David Chen had sent before he'd even left the building. "Confirming your second interview with Ms. Morgan, Tuesday, 10 a.m. Please bring references and be prepared to discuss compensation expectations. Looking forward to continuing our conversation. Compensation expectations. Ethan almost laughed. His current expectation was making rent without having to choose which bill to pay late. Anything beyond that felt like fantasy. The train lurched to a stop at 86th Street, and Ethan stepped onto the platform into the familiar chaos of his neighborhood. Not the gleaming Manhattan of Morgan and Associates, but the worn edges of the Upper West Side where rent control and stubborn longtime residents held out against gentrification's steady encroachment. He walked past the bodega where Miguel always saved the day-old bread for him at half price, past the laundromat where Mrs. Chen watched Mia sometimes when his shifts overlapped, past the small ecosystem of survival he'd built from necessity, and the kindness of strangers who understood struggle. The after-school program was in the basement of St. Anthony's, run by a rotating cast of volunteers and one permanently exhausted coordinator named Jennifer, who believed in second chances and affordable childcare with equal fervor. "Daddy!" Mia launched herself at him the moment he appeared in the doorway, her backpack flying, her face split by a grin that made every impossible choice worth it. "Did you get it? Did you get the job?" Ethan scooped her up, even though she was getting too big for it, even though his back protested and his arms ached from the tension he'd been carrying all day. "Not yet, sweetheart. But I got a second interview, Tuesday morning." "That's good though, right?" Mia pulled back to study his face with the serious intensity she'd inherited from her mother. "Ms. Jennifer said second interviews mean they really like you." "Ms. Jennifer is very smart," Ethan agreed, setting Mia down and nodding his thanks to Jennifer, who was helping another parent sign out their kid. "And yes, it's good. It's really good." "Good enough for Celebration Pizza?" "Good enough for Celebration Pizza." Mia's squeal of delight made every parent in the room turn and smile. Ethan signed her out, hefted her backpack alongside his own bag, and led her back into the afternoon sunshine that slanted gold between buildings. "Can I get extra cheese?" Mia asked, slipping her hand into his. "You can get whatever you want." "Even dessert?" "Even dessert." "Daddy, did something really good happen? You never let me get dessert on weeknights." Ethan looked down at his daughter, at her upturned face and intelligent eyes, and the trust she placed in him despite 3 years of struggle and sacrifice and barely enough. "Something really good happened," he confirmed. "I helped someone today, and instead of it costing me everything, it might have given me everything. Like a fairy tale? Like real life, when it decides to be kind." They walked to Gino's, the pizza place 3 blocks over that Mia considered the height of luxury because they had red checkered tablecloths and breadsticks that came free with every order. Ethan usually avoided it. Too expensive, too tempting, too much like the life they couldn't afford. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like investment, like down payment on a future that was finally coming into focus. "Table for 2? The hostess asked, and Ethan nodded, letting himself be led to a booth by the window where they could watch the street while they waited. Mia ordered her pizza with the solemnity of someone making crucial decisions. Extra cheese, yes. Pepperoni, absolutely. Mushrooms, never. When the waitress left, she folded her hands on the table and fixed Ethan with that serious look again. "Tell me about the helping," she said. "What happened?" So Ethan told her, editing for age appropriateness but keeping the essential truth. The woman who fell. The choice he made. The unexpected grace of second chances. Mia listened with the focused attention she brought to her favorite stories, and when he finished, she nodded like he'd confirmed something she already knew. "You did the right thing," she said. "That's what you always tell me. Do the right thing even when it's hard." "That's what I always tell you," Ethan agreed. "And it worked out. Because you were good." "It's not always that simple, Mia. Sometimes you do the right thing and it still costs you. But not this time." "No," Ethan said softly. "Not this time." The pizza arrived, and they ate with the uncomplicated pleasure of people who didn't take hot meals for granted. Mia told him about school, about the science project on butterflies she was working on, about how Tommy Martinez said girls couldn't be scientists, and she'd informed him that Marie Curie would like a word. Ethan listened and laughed and felt the knot of anxiety that lived permanently in his chest loosened just slightly. After dinner, After the promised dessert of chocolate cake that made Mia's eyes go wide, they walked home through the gathering dusk. The studio apartment waited for them on the fourth floor of a walk-up that had been old when Ethan's grandparents were young. One room serving as bedroom, living room, kitchen, and office space. A bathroom the size of a closet. Windows that overlooked the air shaft and let in noise but rarely light. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, and it was clean, and it was safe. That was more than a lot of people had. "Homework time," Ethan announced, and Mia groaned with theatrical despair before pulling out her workbooks and settling at the small table that served as their dining room, her desk, and Ethan's workspace. While she worked through math problems, Ethan opened his laptop and began the familiar evening ritual of checking schedules, confirming shifts, making sure the complex machinery of their survival stayed running. Coffee shop tomorrow at 6 a.m. Delivery route Saturday afternoon. Custodial Sunday night. And now, threading through it all, the knowledge that Tuesday morning he had an interview that could change everything. His phone buzzed, an email from an address he didn't recognize. The subject line read, "From Claire Morgan, personal." Ethan's hand hesitated over the trackpad. Then he clicked. "Mr. Cole, I wanted to reach out personally to thank you for your assistance this morning. I also wanted to apologize for any anxiety my initial reaction may have caused. When Patricia told me about the missed interview, I spoke hastily before I understood the situation. I've since reviewed your file, and I've asked David to arrange our second interview for Tuesday. I look forward to speaking with you then. In the meantime, I wanted you to know that your choice to help a stranger, even at significant personal cost, reflects exactly the kind of character we value at Morgan & Associates. Whatever happens Tuesday, I'm grateful our paths crossed today. Claire Morgan." Ethan read it twice, then a third time, parsing each sentence for hidden meaning or polite rejection disguised as gratitude. But the words seemed genuine, direct, the kind of communication from someone who valued honesty over corporate polish. "Daddy?" Mia's voice pulled him back. "Can you check my math?" He closed the laptop and moved to her side, reviewing the careful rows of addition and subtraction. She'd gotten them all right, her numbers neat and precise. "Perfect," he said. "You're getting really good at this. Ms. Peterson says I might be ready for advanced math next year." "That's my girl. Smart like your mom." Mia's expression softened. She didn't remember Sarah. How could she? She'd never known her, but she'd grown up with stories, with photographs, with the careful construction of a mother she'd never meet. "Do you think Mom would be proud of me?" "I think she'd be so proud of you she wouldn't be able to stand it," Ethan said, his throat tight. "Just like I am." "And proud of you? For getting the interview?" "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." They finished homework, then settled into their evening routine. Bath time in the tiny bathroom where Mia had long ago learned to make washcloth turbans and bubble beards. Storytime curled up on the fold-out couch that served as Ethan's bed, reading from the library books they rotated every 2 weeks. And finally, tucking Mia into the twin bed in the corner that was her private space, marked off by a curtain Ethan had hung to give her some sense of her own room. "Daddy," she said as he pulled the blanket up to her chin, "when you get the new job, will we move?" "Would you want to move?" "I don't know. I like my school, and Miss Jennifer, and Miguel at the store." "Then we won't move far. Maybe just to a bigger place. Somewhere you can have your own room with a door." "That would be nice." Mia yawned, her eyes already closing. "But I'd miss falling asleep hearing you move around. It makes me feel safe." Ethan's heart cracked open just a little more. "You'll always be safe, Mia. That's a promise I can keep." "I know," she murmured, already drifting. "Love you, Daddy." "Love you more, sweetheart." He waited until her breathing evened out into sleep, then retreated to the small corner that served as his office space. The laptop glowed in the darkness, and Ethan pulled up the Morgan & Associates website, studying the company that might become his future. They were mid-sized boutique consulting firms specializing in operational efficiency for nonprofit and social impact organizations. Not the highest-paying sector, but meaningful work, the kind that attracted people who cared about more than profit margins. The staff page showed diverse faces, genuine smiles, the kind of casual professionalism that suggested a culture that valued people over presentation. And there was Claire Morgan, CEO, and founder, her official photo showing the same sharp intelligence he'd seen in her eyes that morning, even through pain and blood. Her bio revealed a career path that zigged where others zagged. Corporate consulting for 10 years, then a hard pivot to impact work. Building Morgan and Associates from the ground up with the explicit mission of making organizational excellence accessible to organizations doing good in the world. We believe that effectiveness and ethics aren't competing values, her founder's statement read. The organizations changing our world deserve operational support that honors their mission while driving their impact. That's what we do. That's who we are. Ethan read it twice, feeling something settle in his chest. This wasn't just a job. This was work that mattered, with people who valued the same things he did. And somehow, impossibly, they wanted to interview him for a position at the center of it all. His phone buzzed again. This time a text from an unknown number. Ethan, this is David Chen. Claire passed along your number. Hope that's okay. Wanted to give you heads up that Tuesday's interview is less formal than this afternoon. Claire likes to have real conversations, not performances. Just be yourself. That's what got you here. Also, bring questions. She appreciates candidates who interview her as much as she interviews them. See you Tuesday. DC. Ethan saved the number and typed back a quick thanks, then sat in the blue glow of his laptop and tried to process the surreal turn his life had taken. This morning, he'd been nobody, invisible, another struggling single parent grinding through survival. Tonight, he had personal emails from a CEO and coaching texts from a department head for an interview that could transform everything. It felt fragile, like hope always did, like something that could shatter if he breathed wrong. But Mia was asleep 10 feet away, safe and fed and loved. And Tuesday was coming whether he worried or not. So Ethan closed his laptop, unfolded his couch into its bed configuration, and let himself believe just for tonight that good things could happen to people who'd been broken by the world and put themselves back together through sheer stubborn will. Sleep came easier than it had in months. The weekend passed in its usual blur of work and stolen moments with Mia. Saturday afternoon delivery route. Sunday morning at the playground while other families had brunch and Ethan had coffee in a travel mug and the simple joy of watching his daughter climb and swing and laugh. Sunday night custodial shift while Mia slept at Mrs. Chen's apartment, Ethan pushing a mop through silent office corridors and letting his mind rehearse interview questions. Monday morning, the coffee shop was slammed, the line out the door with the particular chaos that came from corporate offices nearby having some kind of all-hands meeting. Ethan worked the register while his coworker Marcus handled the espresso machine, both of them moving through practice choreography of orders and change and the relentless rhythm of service work. "You're distracted today," Marcus observed during a brief lull. "Everything okay?" "Got a job interview tomorrow. Big one." "Bigger than this palace of caffeinated dreams?" Marcus gestured at the cramped shop with its perpetually broken AC and customer base that ranged from decent humans to entitled nightmares. "Corporate operations coordinator, real salary, real benefits." Marcus whistled low. "That's huge, man. You deserve it." "Don't know about deserve, but I need it." "Same thing, in a just world." Marcus started another espresso shot. "You're gonna kill it. Just remember us little people when you're swimming and health insurance and paid vacation days." Ethan laughed despite his nerves. "If I get this, first thing I do is make sure Mia's inhaler is covered. Second thing is sleep for a week." "Living the dream?" Marcus said, and they both cracked up at the absurdity of it all, at survival disguised as ambition, at the exhaustion that came from wanting basic stability. The shift ended at 2, and Ethan headed home to pick up Mia from school, walking her to the library for the Monday afternoon kids program she loved. While she listened to stories with the other children, Ethan sat in the reading room and pulled out the folder he'd assembled for tomorrow's interview. References from his last real job, 3 years old but still valid. Performance reviews that talked about his reliability, his problem-solving, his calm under pressure. Letters from his current supervisors at all 3 jobs, hastily requested over the weekend, each one vouching for his character if not his corporate qualifications. And finally, a single page he'd written last night, an honest assessment of what he brought to the role and what he hoped to gain from it. It wasn't much, but it was real. And according to David Chen, real was what mattered here. Mr. Cole? The librarian approached with her characteristic quiet that seemed to be a job requirement. I just wanted to say I heard Mia telling the other children her dad has a big interview tomorrow. I hope it goes wonderfully. Thank you, Mrs. Rodriguez. I appreciate that. Mia's very proud of you, you know. She talks about you constantly. The other day, she told everyone her daddy was a superhero because he works 3 jobs so she can have a good life. Ethan's eyes burned. She said that? She did. And she's right. What you do for that little girl, the sacrifice and love, that's heroic. I hope this company recognizes what they'd be getting. After the library, they stopped at the bodega where Miguel was restocking shelves. He looked up when they entered, his weathered face creasing into a smile. Ethan, Mia, I saved you the good bread today, not the day old. Special occasion tomorrow, yes? How did you know? Ethan asked. Miguel tapped his temple. I know things. And Mia, she tells me her papa has interview with big company. So today, fresh bread. And this? He reached behind the counter and produced a small chocolate bar, the expensive kind he usually kept for his own grandchildren. For luck. Mia's face lit up. Thank you, Mr. Miguel. You be good for your papa tonight, yes? Let him rest before the big day. They carried their groceries home, fresh bread. The vegetables Miguel had marked down but were still good. Enough for a simple dinner and tomorrow's breakfast. Ethan cooked while Mia practiced her spelling words, the small apartment filled with the ordinary sounds of their ordinary life that he was trying so hard to improve. That night, after Mia was asleep, Ethan stood at the window looking out at the air shaft and the slice of sky visible between buildings. Somewhere out there, Claire Morgan was probably working late in her office, reviewing files or making decisions that affected dozens of people's livelihoods. Did she think about him at all? About the man who'd helped her last Tuesday, who'd sacrificed his interview time to make sure she was safe? Or was he just another candidate, another folder in the stack, distinguished only by an unusual introduction? His phone buzzed. Another text from David Chen. One more thing for tomorrow. Claire's going to ask you about your long-term goals. Don't give her the answer you think she wants. Give her the real one. Trust me on this. Ethan typed back, what if the real answer is just wanting stability for my daughter? The response came immediately. That is the answer. See you at 10. Ethan set his phone down and let himself breathe. Tomorrow would come regardless of his anxiety. The interview would happen. And whatever the outcome, he'd know he'd done his best with who he was and what he had. That would have to be enough. Tuesday morning arrived crisp and clear, the kind of October day that promised autumn without delivering cold. Ethan woke at 5, unable to sleep longer, and spent the quiet hour before Mia's alarm reviewing his notes and trying to calm the chaos in his chest. He'd ironed his backup shirt the night before, the white one that was professional if unremarkable. His only suit jacket, purchased from a thrift store 2 years ago for a funeral, hung ready on the bathroom door. You look fancy, Mia announced when she emerged from behind her curtain, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Like a businessman in the movies. That's the goal, Ethan said, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time. What do you think? Mia studied him critically. You need to smile more. You look nervous. I am nervous. But you're also really good at your job, all 3 of your jobs, so this should be easy. Ethan knelt down to her level, taking her hands. Thank you for believing in me, sweetheart. It helps more than you know. I always believe in you, Daddy. You're the best person I know. They had breakfast together, Miguel's fresh bread with butter and jam, orange juice from concentrate that Ethan made special. Then Ethan walked Mia to school, hugged her goodbye at the gate, and headed for the subway with 2 hours to spare before his interview. He arrived at 900 Madison at 9:30, giving himself time to settle his nerves in a coffee shop across the street. Through the window, he watched people flow in and out of the building's revolving doors, all of them confident and purposeful, all of them belonging in a way he didn't yet. At 9:55, he crossed the street and entered the marble lobby. The elevator ride to 17 felt faster this time, less weighted with desperation. When the doors opened, Patricia was there waiting. Mr. Cole, right on time. Miss Morgan is ready for you. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee? I'm fine, thank you. This way. She led him past the conference rooms to Claire Morgan's office, knocked once, then opened the door. Claire stood at her window looking out at the same Madison Avenue view Ethan had watched from below. She turned when they entered, and Ethan saw that the bandage above her temple had been replaced by a smaller one, barely visible against her dark hair. "Ethan," she said, crossing to shake his hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "Thank you for coming. Please sit." The office was less intimidating than he'd expected. Yes, it was large and well-appointed, but it was also clearly worked in, with files stacked on the credenza and coffee rings on the desk, and the comfortable disorder of someone who valued function over presentation. "How's your head?" Ethan asked as he settled into the chair across from her desk. 12 stitches and a mild concussion, but I'll survive, thanks to you." Claire sat down, folding her hands on the desk. "I've been looking forward to this conversation all week." "So have I, and I wanted to thank you for the second chance. I know showing up late to an interview isn't exactly standard procedure." "No, it's not, but then stopping to help a stranger instead of protecting your own interests isn't exactly standard either." Claire leaned back in her chair, studying him with that same intense attention he'd noticed last week. "I've read your file. I know what you've been through the past 3 years. I know what you've survived, and I know what this job represents for you and your daughter." "Then you understand why I want it," Ethan said. "I do, but I need to understand something else first." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "When you stopped to help me last Tuesday, you made a choice that could have cost you everything you've been working toward. I need to know if that was an anomaly, one good decision in a moment of crisis, or if that's who you are consistently, because the job I'm offering requires that kind of judgment every day." Ethan met her gaze steadily. "It's who I try to be. I don't always succeed, but I've learned that the kind of person I am matters more than the kind of circumstances I'm in. I want Mia to see that demonstrated, not just talked about. Even when it costs you. Especially then, because that's when it means something." Claire nodded slowly, something shifting in her expression. "David was right about you. He said you'd be honest, even if it didn't serve you." "I don't know how to be anything else anymore," Ethan admitted. 3 years of survival stripped away everything that wasn't essential. What's left is pretty simple. Work hard, do right, take care of my daughter. That's all I've got. That's more than most people have." Claire opened a folder on her desk. "Let me tell you what I'm actually offering you, and then you can tell me if you're interested." She outlined the position: operations coordinator reporting directly to David, managing workflow for 3 major client accounts, coordinating between project teams and client stakeholders, troubleshooting crises, optimizing processes. The salary made Ethan's breath catch. The benefits package included health insurance that would cover Mia's asthma completely. The hours were 40 per week, occasionally more during crunch times, but with flexibility for family needs. "We also have a policy," Claire continued, "that no employee should have to choose between their job and their family. If Mia's sick, you stay home. If she has a school event, you go. We trust our people to manage their responsibilities, and that includes the responsibility of being a good parent." "That's not standard in most places," Ethan said quietly. "No, it's not. But I built this company on the principle that people do their best work when they're not constantly stressed about survival. If you're worried about making rent or affording medical care or whether you can attend your daughter's school play, you can't focus on the work that matters. So we remove those barriers." "Why?" The question escaped before Ethan could stop it. Why build a company this way when standard practice would be more profitable? Claire smiled, and it transformed her face from professional to genuinely warm. "Because I spent 10 years in corporate consulting watching talented people burn out trying to balance impossible demands. I watched parents miss their children's childhoods. I watched health crises become financial catastrophes. And I decided that if I was going to build something, it would be better than that. It would honor the reality that our people are whole humans with lives and families and needs beyond their job descriptions. That's why you work with nonprofits and social impact organizations." "Exactly. They're trying to make the world better. The least we can do is make their operations better while treating our own people like they matter." She closed the folder. "So that's the offer. Operations coordinator, full benefits, immediate start date if you accept. What questions do you have for me?" Ethan's mind raced. This was better than anything he'd imagined, better than he'd let himself hope for. But David's advice echoed. Ask real questions. Interview her back. What's the failure rate for new hires in this role? He asked. And what causes it when people don't succeed? Claire's eyebrows rose, clearly not expecting that question. Good question. In the past 5 years, we've had 4 people in this role. 2 are still with us in advanced positions. 1 left for opportunity that was better for her family. 1 didn't make it past the probation period. Why didn't the last one work out? Because she was excellent at the technical work, but terrible at the human part. She optimized processes, but forgot that processes serve people. She hit every metric but destroyed team morale doing it. We're not looking for perfect execution. We're looking for effective execution that honors our values. What happens when those things conflict? When the most effective solution isn't the most ethical one? Then we choose ethics and find a different solution. Every time. That's non-negotiable. Claire leaned forward. I'm going to be direct with you, Ethan. You're not the most qualified candidate on paper, but you're the person I want for this role. You've proven you can make hard choices under pressure. You've demonstrated the kind of character we value, and you're honest about what you don't know, which is more valuable than pretending expertise you haven't earned. So unless you have serious reservations, I'd like to offer you this position. Ethan's throat tightened. I don't have reservations. I just have a 7-year-old daughter who needs to know she matters more than my career. Can I really bring her here if she's sick? Can I really leave at 5 to pick her up from school? Yes, Claire said simply. That's exactly what I'm telling you. The work matters, but people matter more. That's the foundation everything else is built on. Then I accept, absolutely. Yes. Claire smiled and extended her hand across the desk. Welcome to Morgan & Associates, Ethan. I think you're going to do exceptional work here. They shook on it, and Ethan felt the future click into place like a lock tumbling open, like a door swinging wide onto possibility he'd stopped believing in. The handshake lingered a moment longer than professional courtesy required, both of them understanding that this was more than a business transaction. This was a life-changing shape in real time, possibility becoming certainty. HR will send over the paperwork this afternoon, Claire said, releasing his hand and moving back around her desk. Start date is next Monday if that works for you. I know you'll need to give notice at your current positions. 3 jobs means 3 notices, Ethan said, the reality of it hitting him. But none of them require 2 weeks. They're all used to people leaving suddenly. That's the nature of survival work, isn't it? High turnover, low investment. Claire pulled up something on her computer. We'll need your direct deposit information, emergency contacts, and Mia's details for the health insurance enrollment. Patricia will walk you through everything. But Ethan, before you go, I want to ask you something personal. He nodded, curious what could be more personal than what they'd already discussed. When you stopped to help me last week, you had no idea who I was or that it would lead to this. You made that choice believing it would cost you the interview entirely. That kind of integrity is rare, and I don't want this job to compromise it. Promise me something. What's that? If you ever see me or anyone else in this company making a decision that prioritizes profit over people or efficiency over ethics, you'll say something. You'll push back. Because the moment we stop having people who are willing to do that is the moment we become just another corporate machine that chews people up. Ethan thought about the past 3 years, about every small compromise he'd witnessed in the grinding machinery of low-wage work. Corners cut on safety because overtime was expensive. Sick workers forced to come in because there was no coverage. People treated as replaceable because in survival economy, everyone was desperate enough to accept anything. I can promise that, he said. But you should know I'm not always diplomatic about it. I've lost jobs for speaking up before. Good. We don't need diplomatic. We need honest. Claire stood, signaling the interview's end. Go celebrate with your daughter, Ethan. Take the rest of the day. Enjoy the moment before the real work begins. They walked to the door together, and Claire paused with her hand on the handle. One more thing. Last Tuesday, you told me someone needed help. You were right, but I think we both needed help that morning. You needed someone to see past your circumstances to your character. I needed someone to remind me why I built this company in the first place. So thank you for that. I just did what anyone should do. That's exactly my point. You did what everyone should do, and most people don't. That matters. Patricia was waiting in reception with a folder thick with forms and a smile that suggested she already knew the outcome. Congratulations, Mr. Cole. Let's get your paperwork started. The next hour passed in a blur of signatures and information exchange. Bank details, social security number, Mia's birth date, and medical history for the insurance enrollment. Each form felt like another brick in the foundation of a life he'd been trying to build for 3 years. When Patricia explained the health coverage, Ethan had to blink back tears at the casualness with which she discussed prescription coverage and specialist visits and emergency care. All things that had been sources of constant anxiety now reduced to checkboxes on a benefits form. Your insurance card should arrive within a week, Patricia said, sliding the completed forms into a manila envelope. In the meantime, if Mia needs her medication, have the pharmacy call our benefits coordinator. We'll make sure it's covered immediately. You can do that? We can, and we do. Ms. Morgan is very clear that no one should have to wait for health coverage to become active, especially children. Patricia handed him the envelope along with a welcome packet. Your start date is Monday at 9. Dress code is business casual, but David will show you around and get you oriented. Any questions? Ethan had 1,000 questions, but none that couldn't wait until Monday. I think I'm good for now. Thank you, Patricia, for everything. You're very welcome. And Mr. Cole, we're glad you're joining us. What you did for Miss Morgan, stopping to help even when it cost you something important, that's the kind of person we want here. He left the building in a daze, stepping out into the October sunshine that seemed brighter than it had been an hour ago. His phone showed 12:15, which meant Mia was at lunch in the school cafeteria, probably trading her carrots for someone else's cookies like she did every day, despite his careful packing of healthy options. Ethan pulled out his phone and called the coffee shop first. Marcus, it's Ethan. I got the job. The whoop on the other end was loud enough that Ethan had to pull the phone away from his ear. Yes, I knew it. When do you start? Monday, which means I need to give notice. Can you let Dan know this is my last week? He's going to be pissed about losing you, but happy for you. We all are, man. You deserve this. The delivery service was next, a text to his supervisor because they barely used phones for actual calls. The response came back within minutes. Congrats, we'll miss you, but glad you're moving up. Final shift this Saturday? The custodial company took longer to reach, but eventually Ethan got through to the night manager who'd hired him 2 years ago. Cole, this is unexpected. You've been solid for us. I appreciate the opportunity you gave me when I needed it, but I can't keep working 3 jobs. My daughter needs me home. Understood. Saturday night your last shift then? Yes, sir. Good luck to you. 3 jobs, 3 endings, all handled in less than 20 minutes. It felt anticlimactic somehow, like the past 3 years of grinding survival should require more ceremony in the closing. But low-wage work didn't do ceremony. It did necessity, and when necessity ended, so did the relationship. Ethan walked to the subway feeling unmoored, like he'd cut the anchors that had been dragging him down, but wasn't quite sure how to navigate without them. The train ride uptown gave him time to process, to let the reality settle into his bones. Real job. Real salary, health insurance for Mia, normal hours, a future that looked like more than just survival. He got off at 86th Street and headed for Mia's school, too restless to wait until the 3 o'clock pickup. The school secretary recognized him when he buzzed the entrance. Mr. Cole, it's only 12:30. Is everything all right? Everything's perfect. I just got great news and I want to share it with Mia. Would it be possible to check her out early? The secretary smiled. Let me call her classroom. Give us 5 minutes. Mia appeared in the office doorway looking worried, her backpack hastily zipped and her jacket inside out. Daddy, are you okay? Did something happen? Ethan knelt down and pulled her into a hug. I got the job, sweetheart. I got it. Her squeal echoed through the office, and the secretary laughed as Mia launched herself at Ethan hard enough to nearly knock him over. You got it! I knew you would! I told you you're the best. You did tell me that. And you were right. They signed out and left the building hand in hand, Mia practically vibrating with excitement. Can we celebrate? Can we do something special? We can do anything you want. Mia considered this with the seriousness it deserved. Can we go to the museum, the natural history one with the dinosaurs? Ethan had been prepared to offer ice cream or maybe a trip to the park. The museum meant admission fees and subway fare and a whole afternoon instead of a quick treat. But he was done calculating every expense, done measuring joy in dollars. We can absolutely go to the museum. They took the train to 81st Street and walked to the American Museum of Natural History, joining the Tuesday afternoon crowd of school groups and tourists and other families stealing weekday time together. Ethan paid the suggested admission without the usual guilt over the expense, and they entered the vast halls filled with the accumulated wonders of the natural world. Mia dragged him straight to the dinosaur exhibits, her hand tight in his, her running commentary a steady stream of facts she'd learned from library books and nature documentaries. They stood beneath the towering T-Rex skeleton, and Ethan watched his daughter's face light up with wonder that had nothing to do with screens or advertisements or manufactured entertainment. Just pure amazement at the reality of creatures that had walked the earth millions of years before humans existed. "Daddy, do you think they were scared?" Mia asked, staring up at the massive skull. "The dinosaurs when the asteroid came?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Maybe they didn't understand what was happening. That's sadder, I think, not knowing." She turned to look at him. "But we know things now. We know about asteroids and climate and how to be safe. That's better, right?" "That's better," Ethan agreed, though he thought about all the things he hadn't known how to protect her from: poverty, instability, the grinding anxiety of survival. But maybe now, finally, they were moving towards safety. They wandered through the fossil halls, the ocean life exhibits, the meteorite collection that Mia insisted on reading every single placard for despite Ethan's growing exhaustion. When they finally emerged 3 hours later, the afternoon had shifted toward evening, and Mia was dragging with the particular tiredness that came from too much excitement. "Can we get dinner?" she asked, leaning against him at the subway platform. "We can. What sounds good?" "That Thai place you like. The one with the peanut sauce." Ethan rarely let himself eat at the Thai restaurant 2 blocks from their apartment. It was too expensive, too much like an indulgence when cheaper options existed. But today felt like a day for breaking old patterns. They ordered pad thai and spring rolls and sat in the narrow restaurant with its mismatched chairs and cheerful chaos, sharing food and conversation and the simple pleasure of not rushing toward the next obligation. Mia told him about the science project she was planning, about how she wanted to study metamorphosis and maybe raise caterpillars if Ethan thought their apartment was big enough. "We'll make it big enough," he promised. "Whatever you need for school, we'll figure it out." "Because you have a good job now?" "Because you deserve to learn and explore and have the things you need to do that." Mia nodded, satisfied with this answer. "Daddy, will you still be tired all the time?" The question landed with unexpected weight. "What do you mean?" "You're always tired. Even when you smile, I can see it in your eyes, like you're trying really hard to be happy, but you're too tired to really feel it." She pushed rice around her plate, not meeting his gaze. "I thought if you got the good job, maybe you wouldn't be so tired anymore." Ethan's chest tightened. He'd tried so hard to shield her from his exhaustion, his stress, the constant calculation of survival. But children saw everything, understood more than adults gave them credit for. "You're right," he said quietly. "I am tired. I've been tired for a long time. But this job means I can stop working 3 different places. It means I can sleep normal hours and be home with you more. So yes, I think I'll be less tired. Not right away maybe, but eventually." "Good, because I miss you even when you're here. Like you're here but not really here because you're thinking about work or money or all the hard things." "I'm sorry, Mia. I've been doing my best, but I know it hasn't been enough." She looked up at him with eyes too wise for 7 years. "It's been enough, Daddy. We're okay. I just want you to be happy, okay, not just surviving, okay." How did his daughter understand the difference between survival and living when so many adults never learned it? "I want that too, sweetheart. And I think maybe now we can have it." They finished dinner and walked home through the October dusk, past the familiar landmarks of their neighborhood. But somehow, everything looked different now, like the world had shifted slightly and revealed new possibilities in the spaces between buildings, in the lit windows of apartments, in the ordinary miracle of walking home to a place that was about to become more than just shelter. Mrs. Chen was sweeping the front steps when they arrived. She looked up and smiled. "Ethan, Mia told me you had big interview today. How did it go?" "I got the job," Ethan said, and saying it out loud to someone else made it feel more real somehow. "Wonderful. This calls for celebration. Come, I have fresh almond cookies just made. They followed her into her apartment, which smelled like jasmine tea and the ginger she always kept simmering on the stove. She fed them cookies and listened to Mia's breathless retelling of the museum trip and the job news, nodding and smiling and radiating the kind of warmth that came from understanding struggle intimately. You worked hard for this, Mrs. Chen said to Ethan when Mia had run off to look at her collection of porcelain cats. 3 years I watch you come and go at all hours, always working, always tired, but never complaining. This is good fortune, yes, but also earned. I couldn't have done it without neighbors like you. All the times you watched Mia when my shifts overlapped, or saved dinner for us, or just listened when things got hard. This is what neighbors do, what community does. We help each other survive, so maybe we can all eventually thrive. She refilled his tea. You will pay it forward now, yes? When you see someone else struggling, you will remember these years and help them as you were helped. I will, Ethan promised, and meant it. That night, after Mia was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Ethan sat with his laptop and did something he hadn't allowed himself to do in 3 years. He looked at apartments, not in their current neighborhood where rent control made survival possible, but in places with better schools, safer streets, buildings with elevators and in-unit laundry, and bedrooms with doors instead of curtains. The prices still made him nervous, but he did the math with his new salary and realized that it was possible. Tight, but possible. They could move to a 2-bedroom in a better neighborhood and still save money each month. Mia could have her own room. He could have space to breathe. But as he scrolled through listings, Ethan realized he wasn't ready to leave yet. This neighborhood, this building, these people, they'd held him up when he was drowning. Miguel and Mrs. Chen and Jennifer at the after-school program, all the small kindnesses that had made survival possible. Moving felt like abandoning them, like saying he'd outgrown the community that had sustained him. He closed the laptop and made a different decision. They'd stay for now, save money, build security, let Mia finish the school year with her friends. And when they eventually moved, it would be with gratitude for what this place had given them, not escape from what it represented. The rest of the week passed in a strange limbo between his old life and his new one. He worked his final shifts at the coffee shop, accepting congratulations from regulars who'd watched his struggle for years. He completed his last delivery route, saying goodbye to the supervisor who'd given him flexible hours when he needed them. And Saturday night, he pushed his mop through the office corridors one final time, the familiar rhythm of custodial work now tinged with nostalgia instead of resentment. You're really leaving us? Javier, the other night custodian, asked during their break. Got a corporate job. Operations coordinator. Fancy. You gonna forget about us little people? Never. This work taught me more about operations than any corporate training ever could. You learn real efficiency when you've got 3 floors to clean in 4 hours. Javier laughed. That's the truth. Well, good luck to you, Cole. And hey, if that fancy job doesn't work out, you always got a future in custodial. I'll keep that in mind. Sunday, Ethan spent the day with Mia, doing laundry at the laundromat and grocery shopping and all the ordinary tasks that felt different knowing he wouldn't be rushing off to another shift afterward. That evening, he ironed his shirt for Monday morning and laid out his clothes and tried to quiet the anxiety that kept whispering that this was too good to be true, that something would go wrong, that people like him didn't get happy endings. But Mia's steady breathing from behind her curtain reminded him why he was doing this, not for himself, though he deserved better than survival mode. For her, to give her the childhood she should have, the security every child needed, the demonstration that integrity and hard work could lead somewhere good. Monday morning arrived too quickly and exactly on time, paradoxically both. Ethan woke at 6 from habit, even though he didn't need to be at Morgan & Associates until 9. He made breakfast, got Mia ready for school, walked her to the building like always. But this time when she hugged him goodbye, she whispered, "Good luck on your first day, Daddy. You're going to be amazing." "Thank you, sweetheart. See you at 3. "Yeah, bud." "At 3, she confirmed. "Not at midnight after 3 different jobs." "Not at midnight," he agreed. The subway ride downtown felt different in morning rush hour, surrounded by people heading to offices instead of service jobs, reading newspapers instead of dozing from exhaustion. Ethan watched them and wondered if he looked like he belonged yet, or if his survival years were still written on his face in the lines around his eyes and the wariness in his posture. He arrived at 900 Madison at 8:45, giving himself time to settle before the 9 o'clock start. But when he stepped off the elevator on 17, David Chen was already waiting. "Ethan, welcome. First day jitters?" "Completely terrified," Ethan admitted. "Good. Means you care. Come on, let me show you your desk and introduce you to the team." The office was already buzzing with Monday morning energy, people arriving with coffee and greeting each other with the easy familiarity of colleagues who genuinely liked working together. David led Ethan through the space, pointing out the kitchen, the conference rooms, the quiet room where people could take calls or decompress. "And this is yours," David said, stopping at a desk by the window with a view of the street below. A computer sat waiting, along with a nameplate that read Ethan Cole, Operations Coordinator, and a small potted succulent with a card that said, "Welcome to the team." Ethan ran his fingers over the nameplate, not quite believing it was real. Who sent the plant? Claire. She does it for every new hire. Says it's a reminder that we're responsible for making things grow here, including ourselves. She really means all of it, doesn't she? Everything she said about values and people mattering? Every word. I've worked here 5 years and I've never seen her compromise on those principles. Not once. Even when it cost us clients or contracts or easier paths. David pulled over a chair and sat down. But it also means she expects the same commitment from us. The values aren't just nice words on the website. They're how we operate every day. "I can do that," Ethan said. "I know you can. That's why you're here." David pulled up something on the computer. "Okay, let's get you logged in and oriented. We've got 3 major accounts I want to walk you through, and then this afternoon you'll shadow me on a client call so you can see how we handle stakeholder communication." The morning passed in a flood of information. Account details, client histories, project management systems, communication protocols, all of it delivered with David's patient efficiency. Ethan took notes until his hand cramped, asked questions when things weren't clear, and slowly began to see how the pieces fit together into a coherent operational framework. At noon, David took him to lunch at a cafe 2 blocks over, where half the Morgan and Associates staff seemed to congregate. "This is Ethan Cole, our new operations coordinator," David announced to the table they joined. "Ethan, this is the team you'll be working with most closely." The introductions came rapid fire. Sarah from Client Services, Marcus from Project Management, not his coffee shop Marcus, but confusingly similar name, Jennifer from Finance, who shared Mia's after-school coordinator's name, and Tom from Logistics. They welcomed him with genuine warmth, asked about his background, shared war stories about their own first days. "David's a good teacher, but a terrible cook," Sarah warned. "Never accept food from him at office potlucks." "One time," David protested, "one time I brought store-bought cookies and forgot to remove the packaging, and I never hear the end of it." "It was 3 weeks ago, David." The easy banter reminded Ethan of the best parts of his old job, before the layoffs and the tragedy, when work had been something more than just survival. These people liked each other, enjoyed working together, had built the kind of professional relationships that made hard work feel worthwhile. "So what brought you to Morgan and Associates?" Tom asked. Ethan hesitated, unsure how much to share, but David jumped in smoothly. "Ethan helped Claire when she had an accident a couple weeks ago. Impressed her enough that we fast-tracked his application." "You're the guy who stopped to help her?" Sarah's eyes widened. "She mentioned that in the staff meeting, said someone demonstrated the kind of character we should all aspire to. I just did what anyone should do." "But most people don't," Jennifer said quietly. "That's the point. Claire built this company on the idea that who we are matters as much as what we produce. Sounds like you fit right in." The conversation shifted to work topics, upcoming deadlines, client challenges. Ethan listened more than he spoke, absorbing the rhythm of how this team communicated, how they solved problems collaboratively instead of competitively, how they supported each other instead of undermining. When they returned to the office, David set Ethan up to observe a video call with one of their major clients, a nonprofit providing literacy programs in underserved communities. Ethan watched as David navigated a crisis with calm authority. A grant deadline moved up by 2 weeks, throwing their entire project timeline into chaos. "I understand the pressure you're under," David said to the client, "and I need to be honest with you about what's realistic. We can accelerate some components, but not all of them. What I suggest is we prioritize the grant-critical elements and push the nice-to-haves to phase 2. That way you get what you need for the deadline without compromising quality." The client agreed, and David spent the next 30 minutes restructuring the timeline with input from the team, finding creative solutions that honored both the deadline and their standards. When the call ended, he turned to Ethan. "What did you notice?" "You didn't promise them everything they wanted. You gave them what was actually achievable." "Exactly. A lot of consultants overpromise to keep clients happy, but that just leads to failure and broken trust. We'd rather set realistic expectations and exceed them than promise the moon and deliver disappointment. Even if it means losing the client? Even then. Because our reputation is built on reliability, not optimism. And in the long run, that's what keeps clients coming back." The afternoon continued with more training, more systems, more contexts. By 5 o'clock, Ethan's head was spinning with information, but David seemed satisfied with his progress. "You're picking this up faster than most people. Probably all those years of juggling multiple jobs taught you how to process information quickly." David shut down his computer. "Go home to your daughter. Tomorrow we'll dive into your first account assignment." "That's it? I can just leave at 5? "That's the deal. We work hard during business hours, but we don't glorify overtime here. Go be a dad." Ethan left the office with the unfamiliar luxury of daylight still lingering in the sky. He picked up Mia from after-school care at 3:30, a full hour earlier than his earliest previous pickup time. Her face lit up when she saw him. "You're here! You're actually here early! This is the new normal, sweetheart. Every day, 3:30 pickup." They walked home together, Mia chattering about her day, while Ethan listened and actually had the energy to engage instead of just survive the conversation. They made dinner together in the tiny kitchen, spaghetti with sauce Mia helped stir, and ate while she did homework and he reviewed his training notes. At 7:30, with Mia bathed and storied and tucked into bed, Ethan sat on his fold-out couch and realized he had nothing he had to do. No shift to rush off to, no schedule to coordinate, no desperate calculation of how many hours of sleep he could get before the next obligation. Just quiet. Just rest. Just the simple miracle of time that belonged to him. He pulled out his phone and found a text from Claire Morgan. "Patricia tells me you survived your first day. Welcome aboard. We're glad to have you." Ethan typed back, "Thank you for the chance. I won't let you down." The response came within minutes. "You already proved you won't. Now just prove it to yourself." He set the phone aside and let himself feel it. The weight lifting, the future opening, the possibility that maybe, finally, doing the right thing hadn't cost him everything. Maybe it had given him everything instead. The first month at Morgan and Associates passed in a blur of learning curves and small victories. Ethan absorbed everything David threw at him: project management systems, client communication protocols, the delicate art of coordinating between teams with competing priorities. He made mistakes, caught most of them before they became problems, and learned from the ones that slipped through. But the real adjustment wasn't professional. It was personal, the slow recalibration of a life no longer built around survival. He picked up Mia at 3:30 every day, still half expecting someone to tell him he couldn't leave yet, that there was another shift, another obligation, another sacrifice required. The shock of actually being home for dinner, of helping with homework while still alert enough to comprehend third-grade math, of tucking Mia into bed and still having hours before he needed to sleep, it felt like living in someone else's life. "You seem different," Mia observed one evening in late November, watching him cook actual chicken instead of the budget-friendly pasta they'd lived on for years. "Lighter, somehow." "I'm not working 3 jobs anymore. That makes anyone lighter." "No, it's more than that. You smile with your whole face now, not just your mouth." Ethan paused, spatula in hand, considering this. She was right. The exhaustion that had lived in his bones for 3 years was finally releasing its grip, leaving space for something he'd almost forgotten existed: contentment. "I'm happy, Mia. I think I'm actually happy." "Good. You deserve to be happy, Daddy." The simplicity of her acceptance, the certainty that he deserved good things, made his throat tight. Children believed in fairness before the world taught them otherwise. He was determined to prove her right, to show that integrity could lead somewhere worth going. At work, his first solo project came in week 3. A small nonprofit running after-school programs needed operational restructuring to support their expansion into 3 new locations. David handed him the file with confidence Ethan wasn't sure he'd earned yet. "You've got this," David said. "And if you get stuck, I'm here. But I think you'll find you know more than you think you do." Ethan dove into the assessment, interviewing staff, reviewing their current systems, identifying inefficiencies. And somewhere in the process, he realized David was right. He did know this work. All those years coordinating his own impossible schedule, managing resources that never quite stretched far enough, finding creative solutions when standard approaches failed. It had all been training, just disguised as survival. He presented his recommendations to the client in early December, a restructuring plan that would streamline their operations while maintaining the personal touch that made their programs effective. The executive director listened intently, asked sharp questions, and finally nodded with satisfaction. "This is exactly what we needed. Someone who understands that efficiency can't come at the cost of relationships. These kids need consistency, and your plan preserves that while helping us grow." After the call, David clapped him on the shoulder. "Well done. That was solid work, and you handled the presentation like you'd been doing this for years." "I was terrified the whole time. Good presenters usually are. It keeps you sharp." David pulled up the project schedule on his computer. "I'm assigning you 2 more accounts starting next week. Think you're ready?" Ethan thought about the confidence the client had placed in him, about the solutions he'd found, about the gradual certainty building that he belonged here. "Yeah, I'm ready." But the real test came the following week, when Claire stopped by his desk late on a Thursday afternoon. Ethan had been deep in workflow analysis, 3 monitors displaying different spreadsheets, his desk covered in notes. He looked up to find her studying him with that same evaluating gaze she'd had in their first interview. "Walk with me," she said. "I want to show you something." They took the elevator to the 20th floor, which Ethan had never visited. Claire led him through a door marked Conference Center, into a large room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 20 people sat around a massive table, clearly in the middle of a tense discussion. "This is our board meeting," Claire said quietly. "They meet quarterly to review our performance and strategy. Right now they're debating whether we should pursue a contract with Helix Corporation." "The tech company?" "Yes. They want operational consulting for their expansion into educational software. The contract would be worth more than any 3 of our current accounts combined. It would fund our nonprofit work for the next 2 years without worrying about grant cycles or donation shortfalls." "That sounds like exactly what you need." "It would be, except Helix has a documented history of labor violations in their overseas manufacturing. Nothing illegal, but definitely unethical. Low wages, poor conditions, resistance to unionization efforts. Taking them as a client would compromise everything we say we stand for." Ethan watched the board members argue through the glass. "What does the board want you to do?" "They're split. Half think we can be a positive influence, that consulting for Helix gives us leverage to push them toward better practices. Half think we'd just be providing them ethical cover while they continue business as usual." "What do you think?" Claire was quiet for a long moment. "I think it's easy to rationalize compromise when the money is big enough. I think I'm tired of watching nonprofits struggle for funding while corporations sit on massive profits. And I think I built this company on principles that either mean something or they don't." "So you're going to turn them down?" "I'm going to ask you what you think I should do." Ethan turned to look at her confused. "I've been here a month. You want my opinion on a decision this big?" "You've been here a month, but you've been making hard choices between ethics and survival for 3 years. You stopped to help a stranger when it could have cost you everything you needed. You're exactly the person I want weighing in on this." Through the glass, the debate continued, voices rising with the kind of passion that came from people who genuinely cared about getting it right. Ethan thought about his conversation with Claire in her office, about her promise that when values and profit conflicted, values won every time. "If you take the contract, you'll have money," he said slowly. "But you'll spend the whole time wondering if you sold out. And your staff will wonder too, even if they don't say it. That doubt will eat away at everything you've built here." We could do a lot of good with that money. Fund programs that might not happen otherwise. You could, or you could find another way to fund those programs without compromising who you are. It might take longer, be harder, require more creativity, but you'd keep the thing that makes Morgan and Associates different from every other consulting firm. Claire nodded slowly. And if the board overrules me? If they vote to take the contract anyway? Then you'll have to decide if you can live with that. But you asked what I think you should do, and I think you already know the answer. You're just checking to see if the rest of us still believe it too. A smile ghosted across Claire's face. Patricia said you'd be honest even when it was inconvenient. She was right. It's all I know how to be anymore. Don't lose that, Ethan. This industry has a way of teaching people to hedge their integrity with diplomatic language and strategic compromise. Fight that. We need people who still believe principles matter. They watched the board meeting for another minute. Then Claire straightened her shoulders and headed for the door. Thank you for the reminder of why we do this. What are you going to tell them? That we're not taking the contract, that we'll find another way to fund our growth, and that if anyone at this table doesn't agree, they're welcome to resign from the board. Ethan watched her walk back into the conference room, her posture radiating the kind of quiet authority that came from absolute certainty. Through the glass, he saw her speak, saw the board members listen, saw some nod while others frowned. But no one left the table. No one resigned. He took the elevator back to 17, feeling like he'd just witnessed something important, a demonstration that principles didn't have to be casualties of success, that you could build something meaningful and keep the values that made it worth building. David caught him at his desk 10 minutes later. Claire just called. She said you helped her remember why we turned down lucrative contracts from unethical companies. I just told her what she already knew. Sometimes that's the most valuable thing you can tell someone, especially when they're under pressure to compromise. David leaned against the desk. You're doing good work here, Ethan. Not just the project management, though that's solid, but the way you think about the work, about why we do what we do. That matters more than technical skills. The praise settled warm in Ethan's chest. For 3 years, the only feedback he'd gotten was whether he showed up on time and completed his tasks without complaint. This, recognition for thinking, for contributing, for being more than just a body filling a shift, felt like validation of something deeper than competence. That night, he told Mia about it over dinner, editing out the corporate complexity but keeping the essential point about choosing integrity over money. Miss Morgan sounds like she's really good at being a boss, Mia said, twirling spaghetti on her fork with the elaborate concentration she brought to tasks requiring fine motor skills. She is. She built her whole company around treating people right. Like you do with me. What do you mean? Mia looked up at him with those serious eyes that saw too much. You always choose what's right for me even when it's hard for you. Like when you stopped to help that lady, even though you thought it would cost you the job. You picked helping over yourself. That's what parents do, sweetheart. Not all parents. Tommy Martinez says his dad left because being a dad was too hard and too expensive. But you never left, even when everything was really hard. Ethan's chest constricted. He'd tried so hard to shield her from the worst of their struggle, but children absorbed everything, processed it in ways adults never expected. I'll never leave you, Mia. You're the most important thing in my life. I know. That's why you're a good dad and a good person. And that's why Miss Morgan hired you, because she could tell. The simple logic of it, that character revealed itself in choices, that patterns of integrity created trust, made Ethan realize his daughter understood things about human nature that many adults spent lifetimes failing to learn. December brought the first significant challenge to his new equilibrium. Mia caught a respiratory infection that turned serious fast, her asthma complicating what should have been a routine cold. Ethan took her to the doctor on a Monday morning, and by Tuesday afternoon she was in the hospital, her small frame hooked up to oxygen and monitors that beeped with mechanical precision. He called David from the hospital corridor, his voice tight with the fear that had lived dormant for 3 years, always ready to surface when Mia's health was threatened. She's stable, but they want to keep her for observation. I need to be here. I'm sorry, I know we have the Richardson presentation tomorrow. Stop, David interrupted. Just stop. Your daughter is in the hospital. You're exactly where you need to be. I'll handle Richardson. But I'm the lead on that account, and I'm your supervisor, and I'm telling you that your family comes first. That's not just company policy, Ethan. That's how we actually operate. Claire would fire me if I suggested anything else. The relief was almost painful. Thank you. I'll check email when I can. Don't. Just focus on Mia. We've got everything covered here. Ethan ended the call and returned to Mia's room, where she lay small and pale against hospital white sheets, her breathing assisted by tubes and machines. Mrs. Chen had already arrived, summoned by some grandmother instinct that transcended blood relation. I brought soup, she said, pressing a thermos into his hands. You need to eat. Can't help Mia if you don't take care of yourself. For 3 days, Ethan maintained vigil while Morgan and associates continued without him. David sent one text each morning, just checking in, no pressure, and otherwise left him alone. His paycheck arrived on schedule with no deductions for the absence. The health insurance covered everything without question or copay drama. The support was so complete, so unconditional, that Ethan kept waiting for the catch that never came. On the 3rd day, Mia's breathing improved enough to remove the oxygen support. The doctor was cautiously optimistic about discharge the following day. Ethan was finally relaxing when his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Mr. Cole? This is the billing department at Presbyterian Hospital. I'm calling to confirm your insurance information. Ethan's stomach dropped, the old terror rising. Medical bills had destroyed him once before. It should all be on file. Morgan and Associates provided the card when we admitted. Yes, I have that. I'm just calling to let you know that your coverage is excellent. Your daughter's stay is fully covered, including the specialist consultations and all medications. You'll have no out-of-pocket costs. The woman said it like it was routine, like health insurance that actually covered healthcare was normal instead of miraculous. Ethan thanked her and ended the call, feeling lightheaded with relief, and the memory of how different this had been 3 years ago, when Sarah died and the bills came and his whole life collapsed under the weight of American healthcare. Mia came home Thursday afternoon, still fragile but recovering. Ethan settled her on the couch with blankets and books and stern instructions to rest. Then he sat down and finally checked his work email, bracing for the backlog. Instead, he found a message from Claire with the subject line, "Family first means family first." Ethan, David told me about Mia's hospitalization. I hope she's recovering well. I wanted to reach out personally to remind you that we mean what we say about prioritizing family. Take whatever time you need. The work will be here when you're ready to return. What matters is that your daughter gets the care and attention she needs, and that you're not stressed about choosing between her health and your job. That's exactly the kind of impossible choice this company was designed to eliminate. Take care of each other. Claire. Ethan read it 3 times, his eyes burning. In his previous corporate life, missing 3 days would have meant subtle retaliation, the slow erosion of trust and opportunity. Here, it meant unqualified support and the reiteration of values that actually guided action. He typed a response thanking her, then closed his laptop and focused on what mattered, making soup for Mia, reading her favorite books aloud, being present in a way he couldn't have been when he was juggling 3 jobs and constant terror about medical costs. By Monday, Mia was well enough to return to school, though Ethan still felt nervous leaving her. He walked her to the classroom door and spoke quietly with her teacher about her recent hospitalization and the need to watch for any breathing difficulties. Of course, Mr. Cole. We'll keep close eye on her. And I wanted to tell you, Mia's been doing wonderful work this year. She's reading above grade level, and her science projects show real critical thinking. You should be very proud. I am, Ethan said, his throat tight. She's the best thing I've ever done. At work, his desk was exactly as he'd left it, with one addition, a card signed by the entire staff. Welcome back. Hope Mia's feeling better. We missed you. Small messages filled the margins, personal notes from people he'd worked with for only 2 months, but who'd taken time to express genuine care. David appeared at his elbow. How is she? Better, still recovering, but the doctors are optimistic. Good. And how are you? Ethan thought about the question, about the automatic fine he'd learned to give when working jobs where honesty about struggle was dangerous. But this was different. I'm okay. Grateful the insurance covered everything. Grateful you covered for me here. Grateful I didn't have to choose between being at the hospital and keeping my job. That's how it should work everywhere, David said, but I know it doesn't. I'm glad it does here. They walked to Ethan's desk together, and David pulled up the project files. Richardson's presentation went well. They signed for another year, and they specifically asked if you'd be their primary coordinator going forward. I told them you would be. Assuming that works for you? Absolutely. What did I miss on the other accounts? Nothing that can't catch you up on. But Ethan, I need you to hear something. You were gone 3 days dealing with a family emergency. That's not something you need to make up for or prove yourself after. That's just life happening. And we handled it. The system worked exactly how it's designed to. The message was clear, but old habits died hard. Ethan had been trained by survival to believe that any absence was a liability, any human need a weakness. Learning to trust that support was real and unconditional would take more than 2 months. The weeks leading to Christmas brought the usual year-end chaos, clients wanting projects completed before holiday breaks, staff juggling work and family obligations, the delicate balance of productivity and humanity. Ethan navigated it with growing confidence, managing timelines and expectations while maintaining the relationships that made the work sustainable. The office holiday party was unlike anything he'd experienced in corporate settings. No open bar leading to regrettable behavior, no forced fun or awkward games, just the staff gathering in a rented space, bringing family members, sharing food and stories, and genuine appreciation for each other. Mia came with him, shy at first but quickly adopted by the other employees' children into their games. Claire found him near the refreshment table, watching Mia laugh with kids her age. "She's lovely. You're raising a remarkable young woman." "I'm trying. Some days I'm not sure I'm doing it right." "The fact that you worry about it means you probably are." Claire accepted a glass of sparkling cider from a passing server. "I wanted to thank you for your advice about the Helix contract. The board voted unanimously to decline. It was the right call." "Did you find alternative funding?" "We did, actually. 3 smaller contracts with organizations whose values align with ours. It'll take more work to service them, but it won't keep us up at night wondering if we sold out." "That's worth the extra work." "It is. And Ethan, I've been meaning to tell you, you've exceeded every expectation I had when I hired you. The quality of your work, your judgment under pressure, the way you interact with clients and staff, you're exactly what we needed." The praise landed differently than it would have months ago. Ethan had learned to accept positive feedback as genuine instead of suspecting hidden criticism. "Thank you. This job has changed my life. Mine and Mia's both." "Good. That's what meaningful work should do. Improve lives on both sides of the employment relationship." Claire paused, seeming to consider her next words carefully. "I'd like to talk to you in January about expanding your role. You've shown leadership capacity that suggests you're ready for more responsibility. Think about what that might look like for you." Before Ethan could respond, Mia appeared at his side, breathless and grinning. "Daddy, can I have cookies? Sarah's mom made them, and they're really good." "You can have 2 cookies," Ethan said, and Mia darted off with the single-minded focus of a child on a sugar mission. Claire smiled. "She's wonderful. Reminds me of my daughter at that age, all energy and curiosity and absolute certainty about what she wants." "You have a daughter?" "2, actually, teenagers now, which is its own adventure. But I remember those years when they were small and I was trying to build a career and be present for them. It's not easy, balancing it all." "How did you manage it?" "Imperfectly, with a lot of help and some flexible arrangements I've tried to institutionalize here. I wanted to build a company where parents didn't have to sacrifice their children's childhoods to advance professionally, where sick kids didn't mean career suicide, where family obligations were respected instead of penalized." "You've succeeded," Ethan said quietly. "Last week, when Mia was in the hospital, I kept waiting for the consequences, for the subtle message that I'd let the team down or damaged my reputation. It never came. That's revolutionary." "It's human," Claire corrected. "It should be standard practice. The fact that it's revolutionary says more about how broken our systems are than how innovative we are." They stood together watching the party, the children playing and adults talking, and the easy warmth of people who genuinely liked each other. This was what work could be, Ethan realized, not just survival or obligation, but community. A place where people showed up not just because they had to, but because they wanted to contribute to something meaningful. Christmas came with its own small miracles. Ethan's first real paycheck allowed him to buy Mia the telescope she'd been wanting, the kind that could actually see planets instead of just pretending. On Christmas morning, her face when she unwrapped it made every sacrifice, every hard choice, every moment of doubt worth it. "This is the best Christmas ever," she declared, already assembling the telescope with the instruction manual spread across the floor. "Can we look at the moon tonight?" "We can look at whatever you want." "Even Jupiter?" "The box says we can see Jupiter's moons if the sky is clear." "Even Jupiter." She threw her arms around him with the unselfconscious affection of childhood. "Thank you, Daddy, for the telescope and for everything, for working hard so we can have good things." "You're welcome, sweetheart. You deserve all the good things." That night, they bundled up against the December cold and took the telescope to Riverside Park. The sky was clear, unusual for the city, and Ethan helped Mia set up and focus while other families walked past with their own post-Christmas activities. Through the lens, Jupiter appeared as a bright disk with 4 tiny points of light arranged around it, the Galilean moons that had changed humanity's understanding of the cosmos 400 years ago. "I can see them," Mia breathed, her voice full of wonder. "The moons, they're actually there." Ethan looked at his daughter silhouetted against the city lights, 7 years old and already reaching for the stars, and felt something settle in his chest that had been unsettled for years. Peace, maybe, or just the quiet certainty that they were going to be okay, more than okay. They were going to thrive. The year ended with a text from Claire on New Year's Eve. "Happy New Year, Ethan. Looking forward to all we'll accomplish together in the coming year. Thank you for being exactly who you are." Ethan typed back his thanks, then tucked Mia into bed at her normal bedtime despite her protests that New Year's meant staying up late. "Next year," he promised. "When you're 8. For now, sleep." "Will next year be as good as this year was?" she asked, already drowsy. "I think it'll be even better. Because we have stability now. Because we have each other, and everything else we need flows from that." She smiled and closed her eyes, and Ethan sat beside her bed until her breathing evened into sleep. Then he moved to the window and looked out at the city lights, at the neighborhood that had held them through their hardest years, at the future that was finally coming into focus. One choice. One stranger. One moment of choosing right over easy. And everything had changed. Not because the universe rewarded virtue, it didn't, not reliably, but because Claire Morgan had built something rare, a company where values weren't marketing copy, but actual operating principles, where a single parent could work without sacrificing their child, where integrity was recognized instead of punished, where doing the right thing didn't cost everything. Ethan's phone buzzed with midnight greetings from David, from colleagues, from neighbors who'd become family. He responded to each one, grateful for the web of connection that had formed around him and Mia. Then he closed his eyes and let himself believe what his daughter already knew. They were going to be more than fine. They were going to be extraordinary in all the small, ordinary ways that actually mattered. January arrived with the particular clarity that came from surviving winter's darkest months and emerging into lengthening days. Ethan returned to work after the holiday break feeling settled in a way he hadn't experienced in years. The anxious edge that had defined his existence for so long finally dulled into manageable background noise. Claire's promised conversation about expanding his role came on the second Wednesday of the new year. She called him into her office mid-morning, and Ethan felt the familiar flutter of nerves despite months of positive reinforcement. "Relax," Claire said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "This is good news, I promise." "Good news still makes me nervous. I'm working on it." "Fair enough, so here's what I'm thinking. You've been operations coordinator for 4 months, and you're already performing at a level most people take a year to reach. Your client satisfaction scores are excellent. Your team collaboration is exemplary, and you've demonstrated the kind of judgment we value. I'd like to promote you to senior operations coordinator with expanded responsibilities and corresponding compensation increase." Ethan's breath caught. "Promoted? Already?" "We don't believe in arbitrary timelines here. When someone's ready for more responsibility, we give it to them. You're ready." Claire pulled up something on her computer. The role would include mentoring new coordinators, taking lead on our largest accounts, and participating in strategic planning for operational development. Salary increase is 15%, and you'd have more input into company direction. 15%. Ethan did the mental math automatically, old habits from survival budgeting. That was enough to move to a 2-bedroom apartment without anxiety. Enough to start saving for Mia's future education. Enough to stop calculating every expense. I don't know what to say. Say yes if you want it. Say you need time to think if you don't. But Ethan, I want to be clear about something. This isn't charity or special treatment because of how we met. This is recognition of the value you bring to this organization. You've earned this. Yes, Ethan said, the word coming easier than he expected. Absolutely yes. Good. We'll make it official next week, but I wanted to tell you personally first. Claire leaned back in her chair, studying him with that evaluating look he'd learned meant she was about to say something important. Can I ask you something personal? Of course. When you stopped to help me that morning last October, what were you thinking in that moment? What made you choose to help instead of protecting your interview? Ethan considered the question, reaching back to that crystalline moment when choice compressed into action. I was thinking that if I walked past you, I'd have to look at Mia that night and know I'd chosen my own advancement over someone who needed help. And I couldn't live with that. The job mattered desperately, but who I was as a person mattered more. Even knowing what it might cost you. Especially then, because that's when character actually means something, when it's expensive to maintain. Claire nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that moment a lot these past few months. About how rare it is to find people who genuinely practice what they claim to believe. Most people talk about values in the abstract, but when testing comes, they find reasons to compromise. You didn't. I couldn't afford to. I'd already lost so much, my wife, my career, my financial security. Integrity was all I had left. If I gave that up too, there'd be nothing worth building on. That's exactly why I wanted you here, and that's why I'm promoting you now. Because this company only works if we have people at every level who are willing to choose right over easy. Who'll push back when I make mistakes? Who'll hold the line on values even when profit tempts otherwise? You haven't made any mistakes that I've seen? Claire laughed. Give it time. I'm human, which means I'm fallible. When I slip, I need people around me who'll say so. That's how we maintain what we've built here. The conversation shifted to logistics. Transition timeline, new account assignments, the mentoring program Ethan would help develop. They talked for nearly an hour, and when Ethan finally returned to his desk, David was waiting with a knowing smile. She told you about the promotion? How did you know? Because I recommended it 6 weeks ago, and Claire's been waiting for the right moment. Congratulations, you've earned it. Thank you for the recommendation and for everything you've taught me. You made it easy. Best new hire I've trained in 5 years. David pulled up a chair. So now comes the interesting part. You're going to mentor our next operations coordinator. She starts Monday. Recent college grad, smart as hell, but no real-world experience. I need you to teach her what I taught you, the technical skills and the values both. The responsibility of it settled over Ethan with unexpected weight. 4 months ago, he'd been desperate for someone to give him a chance. Now he was being trusted to shape someone else's professional foundation. What if I'm not ready to mentor anyone? You're ready. You know how I know? Because you're worried about doing it right. The people who aren't ready never question their readiness. The new coordinator was named Jessica Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen from Ethan's building, but sharing her sharp intelligence and no-nonsense approach to problems. She arrived Monday morning with the particular combination of confidence and terror that marked people who'd succeeded academically but hadn't yet tested themselves in practical application. I've been assigned to shadow you for the first 2 weeks, she said, shaking Ethan's hand with firm professionalism. David says you're the person who'll teach me how we actually work here. Then let's start with the most important lesson. The technical skills matter, but the values matter more. Everything we do here serves people, our clients, their communities, our team. If you ever find yourself choosing efficiency over ethics, you've made the wrong choice. Jessica pulled out a notebook, already taking notes. That's not what they taught us in business school. No, it's not. Business school teaches optimization and profit maximization. We teach effectiveness in service of mission. Very different frameworks. Over the following weeks, Ethan found himself articulating principles he'd absorbed through experience but never formally structured. how to manage competing deadlines without sacrificing quality, how to communicate bad news to clients in ways that built trust instead of destroying it, how to coordinate between teams with different priorities and find solutions that honored everyone's needs. But more than that, he taught Jessica what David had taught him, that people weren't resources to be managed, but humans to be respected. That family emergencies were exactly that, emergencies, not inconveniences to be minimized. That sustainable work required boundaries between professional and personal, and maintaining those boundaries was strength, not weakness. "You're different from other senior staff I've worked with," Jessica observed during their third week together. They were reviewing a project timeline, and Ethan had just restructured it to accommodate a team member's childcare conflict. "How so?" "You actually mean what you say about work-life balance. Most managers talk about it, but then create conditions that make it impossible. You restructure the work to fit people's lives instead of demanding they restructure their lives to fit the work." "That's because I've lived the alternative. I know what it costs to constantly sacrifice family for professional demands. We don't do that here." "Is that why you came to Morgan & Associates?" Ethan paused, considering how much to share. But if he was teaching values, modeling vulnerability seemed important. "I came here because I was desperate for stability, and Claire Morgan gave me a chance when I needed it most. I stayed because I discovered this company actually practices what it preaches. And I'm mentoring you because I want to help build a professional environment where people don't have to choose between career success and human decency." Jessica was quiet for a moment, absorbing this. "My business school professors would say that's inefficient." "Your business school professors probably never had to choose between making rent and buying their kids' medication. Efficiency at the cost of humanity isn't actually efficient. It's just cruelty with better PR." The conversation marked a shift in their working relationship. Jessica stopped approaching the work as academic exercise and started engaging with the human reality underneath the projects and timelines. Her questions became sharper, more focused on impact than metrics. Ethan watched her transformation and recognized himself 4 months earlier, learning that work could be meaningful instead of merely mercenary. In February, Mia's school called with an opportunity that crystallized how much had changed. They were nominating her for an advanced science program at a magnet school across the city, a competitive placement that would give her access to resources and instruction far beyond what her current school could offer. "The program is free," her teacher explained during the parent meeting, "but it requires significant family support. Science fair projects, additional homework, field trips. The students who succeed are the ones whose parents can be actively involved." 6 months ago, the answer would have been automatic no. Ethan couldn't have managed increased parental involvement while working 3 jobs and barely sleeping. But now, sitting in the small classroom with other parents, he found himself saying yes. Yes, he could help with projects. Yes, he could attend field trips. Yes, his schedule had the flexibility to support Mia's academic growth. "Are you sure, Daddy?" Mia asked on the walk home, her hand small in his. "Ms. Peterson says it's a lot of extra work." "I'm sure. You're brilliant and curious, and you deserve every opportunity to develop those gifts. We'll figure it out together." "Together?" Mia repeated, testing the word. "I like that we can do things together now. Before, you were always working or sleeping or rushing somewhere." The casual observation hit harder than any criticism could have. His daughter had adapted to his absence, normalized survival mode parenting, learned not to expect his presence. Now she was slowly recalibrating to a father who was actually available, and the wonder in her voice when she talked about "together" broke his heart and healed it simultaneously. The science program acceptance came in March, and Ethan celebrated by doing something he'd been avoiding since the promotion. He started looking at apartments seriously. Not the desperate scrolling of someone who couldn't afford anything, but the purposeful search of someone with actual choices. They found a 2-bedroom in a building 10 blocks south, still in the neighborhood, but significantly nicer. Elevator, laundry in the basement, windows that faced the street instead of an air shaft. Mia would have her own room, a real one with a door and enough space for her telescope and the growing collection of science books that was taking over their current apartment. "What do you think?" Ethan asked, watching Mia spin in the empty space that would be her bedroom. "I think it's perfect. Can I paint the walls? Maybe dark blue like the night sky?" "You can paint them however you want. She stopped spinning, suddenly serious. Is this real, Daddy? Are we really moving here? It's real. We signed the lease next week. And we can afford it? Without you having to work 3 jobs again? The question revealed the trauma she carried, the awareness that stability could dissolve as quickly as it had appeared. Ethan knelt down to her level, taking her hands. We can afford it. My job pays enough that we'll be comfortable here. You don't have to worry about money anymore, sweetheart. But what if you lose your job? What if something bad happens again? Then we'll figure it out, just like we did before. But Mia, listen to me. I'm good at my work. Miss Morgan values what I do. And even if something did happen, we have savings now. We have stability. We're not living on the edge like we were. She nodded, wanting to believe but not quite trusting it yet. Time would help, Ethan knew. Sustained security would eventually override the survival lessons she'd learned too young. They moved in April, a Saturday operation involving David and several other colleagues who showed up with trucks and muscle and the easy generosity of people who genuinely cared. Mrs. Chen supervised from the sidewalk, directing traffic and providing lunch from containers that seemed to multiply magically. Miguel closed the bodega for 2 hours to help carry boxes, refusing payment and insisting it was what neighbors did. By evening, they were installed in their new space. Mia's room was dark blue as promised, her bed positioned so she could see the street through her window. The telescope sat ready by the glass, pointing toward a sky she could actually see without craning around buildings. Ethan stood in his own bedroom, not a fold-out couch in shared space, and felt the accumulated tension of 3 years finally release. They'd made it. Through loss and struggle and the grinding machinery of survival, they'd arrived at something resembling normal. Better than normal. Good. That night, after Mia was asleep in her new room, Ethan sat at the small desk he'd set up in the living room and pulled out the folder he'd been avoiding for months. Sarah's medical bills, the bankruptcy documents, the accumulated paperwork of catastrophe. He'd kept it all, unable to throw away the evidence of their lowest point. But now, sitting in an apartment he could afford with a job he'd earned and a daughter who was thriving, Ethan realized he didn't need to carry it anymore. The past had shaped him, but it didn't have to define him. He could honor Sarah's memory and their struggle without letting it weigh down their future. He shredded it all, every document, every reminder of debt and desperation. Then he took the bag of shredded paper and threw it down the trash chute, listening to it fall 17 floors to the basement incinerator. Gone. Released. Finished. His phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Heard you moved today. Congratulations on the new place. You and Mia deserve all the good things coming your way. Ethan typed back his thanks, then added something he'd been thinking about for weeks. I've been meaning to ask, why did you really give me that second chance? You could have just let the interview cancellation stand. The response came quickly. Because I built this company after watching my sister lose everything when her husband died and left her with medical debt. She was brilliant, capable, and completely destroyed by circumstances beyond her control. I wanted to create a place where people like her, people like you, could rebuild without having to sacrifice their integrity or their families. When you stopped to help me, you proved you were exactly the kind of person I wanted here. The rest was just confirming what I already knew. Ethan read the message twice, understanding clicking into place. This wasn't about him being special or chosen by fate. This was about Claire Morgan deliberately building something better than the systems that broke people, and recognizing when someone matched the values she was trying to institutionalize. The spring semester brought new challenges and new growth. Mia excelled in the advanced science program, coming home with stories about robotics and chemistry experiments and field trips to research laboratories. Ethan attended every parent event, helped with every project, showed up in ways he'd never been able to before. At work, Jessica was developing into an excellent coordinator under his mentoring, already handling accounts independently and demonstrating the kind of values-driven decision-making that marked Morgan and Associates' staff. Watching her succeed felt like validation of everything Ethan had learned in his own journey from desperation to stability. In May, Claire called an all-staff meeting to announce a major company development. They gathered in the 20th floor conference center, the same room where Ethan had watched the board debate the Helix contract months earlier. I want to share some news that's been in development for the past 6 months, Claire began. We've been approached by several organizations asking us to help them implement our operational model, specifically our approach to valuing employees while maintaining efficiency. Rather than just consulting on their operations, they want to transform their workplace culture to match ours. A murmur ran through the assembled staff. This was bigger than their usual project scope. After considerable discussion with the board and leadership team, we've decided to create a new division focused exclusively on workplace culture transformation. We'll help organizations move from extractive to sustainable employment practices, from profit at all costs to profit with purpose. It's ambitious, and it's going to require significant resources and the right people leading it. Claire paused, her gaze sweeping the room before landing on Ethan. Which is why I'm creating a new director position to build this division from the ground up. I need someone who understands both the theoretical framework and the lived reality of what we're trying to accomplish. Someone who's experienced both extractive workplace culture and sustainable alternatives. Someone who can speak authentically about why this matters. Ethan felt his heart rate accelerate, sensing where this was heading, but not quite believing it. Ethan Cole, I'd like you to consider taking on this role. Director of Workplace Culture Development, reporting directly to me with the authority and resources to build something transformative. You'd be shaping how organizations treat their employees, spreading the model we've proven here to companies across multiple sectors. The room erupted in applause. Ethan sat frozen, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Claire was offering. 7 months ago, he'd been a desperate single father with 3 jobs and no prospects. Now he was being asked to lead a company division, to scale the very values that had saved him. After the meeting, Claire pulled him aside. I know that's a lot to process. You don't have to answer today. Think about it. Talk to Mia. Decide if it's what you want. It's not that I don't want it, Ethan said slowly. It's that I'm not sure I'm qualified. I've been in operations coordination for 7 months. Director-level leadership is exactly what you've been demonstrating since you arrived. Ethan, this isn't about your resume or your years of experience in corporate settings. This is about your understanding of why workplace culture matters and your ability to articulate that to organizations that need to change. You've lived both sides. You can speak to the human cost of extractive practices and the transformative power of sustainable alternatives. That's worth more than a decade of conventional experience. What if I fail? Then we'll learn from it and adjust. But I don't think you will. You've succeeded at everything we've given you because you approach challenges with integrity and persistence. Those qualities don't change just because the title does. Ethan went home that evening with Claire's offer circling in his mind like a satellite in orbit, powerful and constant. He made dinner with Mia, helped her with homework about photosynthesis, listened to her excited explanation of the science fair project she was designing. After she was in bed, he sat in the living room and let himself really consider what accepting would mean. Leading a division, shaping organizational culture across multiple companies, speaking publicly about workplace practices and human dignity. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. His phone rang, David's name on the screen. I heard Claire offered you the director position, David said without preamble. I'm calling to tell you to take it. Just like that? Just like that. Ethan, you're ready for this. More importantly, you're the right person for this. Claire's vision requires someone who genuinely believes in the mission, not just someone executing a business strategy. That's you. I've only been in corporate work for 7 months after 3 years of survival jobs. How am I qualified to direct anything? Because those 3 years taught you more about operational efficiency and human resilience than most executives learn in entire careers. You know what it costs when companies treat people as disposable. You know what's possible when they don't. That knowledge is exactly what this role requires. After they hung up, Ethan pulled out his laptop and did something he hadn't done since getting hired. He looked at his journey objectively, as a story instead of a survival narrative. The project coordinator who lost everything. The single father working 3 jobs. The desperate applicant who stopped to help a stranger. The operations coordinator who'd exceeded expectations. The mentor who'd guided someone else's professional development. The promoted senior coordinator trusted with increasing responsibility. Each step had built on the previous one, creating a foundation that actually could support director-level leadership if he trusted it, if he trusted himself. The next morning, Ethan stopped by Claire's office before the workday officially began. She looked up from her computer, reading his answer and his expression before he spoke. "I'll do it," he said. "I'll take the director position, but I need to be honest. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to need guidance. This is a significant leap." "I know, and I'm here to support you through it. We'll build this together, Ethan. That's how everything worthwhile gets built." They shook hands, and Ethan felt the future click into place again, larger this time, more expansive. He wasn't just building stability for himself and Mia anymore. He was going to help build it for others, scaling the model that had saved him into something that could transform entire organizational cultures. The announcement went out the following week. Ethan Cole, promoted to Director of Workplace Culture Development, effective immediately. The staff celebrated with genuine enthusiasm, and messages poured in from colleagues, clients, even people he'd worked with in his survival jobs who'd somehow heard the news. Miguel sent a text. "Heard about the big promotion. Always knew you were destined for more than delivery routes. Proud of you." Mrs. Chen stopped by the apartment with dumplings and wisdom. "You remember where you came from, yes? You remember the struggle? That memory will keep you honest when success tempts you to forget." "I could never forget," Ethan assured her. "Those years shaped everything I am now." "Good. Then you will lead with wisdom and compassion. The best leaders are those who have suffered and chosen not to inflict that suffering on others." The summer passed in intensive preparation. Ethan worked with Claire to develop the framework for workplace culture transformation, drawing on organizational psychology, labor economics, and his own lived experience. They created assessment tools, implementation strategies, and metrics that measured human flourishing alongside financial performance. In August, they landed their first client, a mid-sized manufacturing company whose CEO had heard Claire speak at a conference and wanted to transform their workplace culture from the ground up. Ethan led the initial assessment, interviewing workers at every level, documenting the gaps between stated values and actual practices. The work was challenging, requiring him to navigate power dynamics and resistance to change while maintaining the integrity that had brought him here. But he found he had a gift for it, an ability to speak truth to authority without alienating the very people who needed to hear it most. His own experience gave him credibility. He wasn't some consultant preaching theory. He was someone who'd survived bad workplace practices and thrived under good ones. 6 months into the transformation project, the manufacturing company's CEO called Claire directly to thank her. "Your director is remarkable. He's helping us see our own blind spots without making us defensive. The changes he's implementing are already improving retention and productivity. This is exactly what we needed." Claire forwarded the email to Ethan with a simple note. "Told you so." That evening, Ethan picked up Mia from her science program and took her to dinner at a restaurant nice enough to have cloth napkins and a wine list he still felt intimidated reading. They celebrated her acceptance into the Regional Science Olympiad and his successful completion of the first transformation project. "I'm really proud of you, Daddy," Mia said, managing her fork with the careful precision that suggested she was aware this was a fancy place requiring fancy manners. "You help people have better jobs, right?" "I help companies treat their workers better, which means people have better jobs and better lives, just like Miss Morgan did for us." "So you're paying it forward, like Mrs. Chen said you should." "Exactly like that." Mia considered this while constructing the perfect bite of pasta. "Do you ever think about that morning when you helped Ms. Morgan, how everything changed from that one choice?" "All the time." "Do you think you would have gotten here anyway, even if you'd gone to the interview on time instead of helping her?" It was a profound question from an 8-year-old, touching on fate and choice and the sliding doors of existence. "I don't know. Maybe I would have gotten the job based on my qualifications, but I wouldn't be the same person I am now. The choice to help her, even when it cost me something, that reinforced who I wanted to be. It made everything that came after possible because it proved to myself and to Claire that my values weren't just words. So the choice was important, not just because of what happened, but because of what it meant. Yes, the outcome mattered, but the choice mattered more. That's what integrity is, choosing right even when the outcome is uncertain." They finished dinner and walked home through the late summer evening, past couples on dates and families with strollers, and all the ordinary human traffic of a city neighborhood. Ethan thought about the past year, about the cascade of events that had started with a stranger bleeding on the pavement and led to a life he'd stopped believing was possible. As they neared their building, Mia slipped her hand into his. "Daddy, I think Mom would be proud of you, of us." The observation, unexpected and profound, made Ethan's eyes burn. "You think so?" "I know so. Because you did what she would have wanted. You took care of me, and you stayed good even when things were really hard. That's what love looks like." Later, after Mia was asleep, Ethan sat at his desk and pulled out the photo of Sarah he kept in his drawer. She smiled out at him from a moment years ago, before illness and tragedy, when their future had seemed secure and predictable. "We made it," he told her photo quietly. "I know you can't hear me, but I need to say it anyway. I kept our daughter safe. I gave her the life you wanted for her. And I didn't compromise who we were in the process. I think you'd be okay with how it all turned out." The photo didn't answer, but Ethan felt something settle anyway, a sense of completion, or perhaps permission. He'd been so focused on survival, on rebuilding, that he'd never really stopped to acknowledge that he'd succeeded, that Mia was thriving, that his career was meaningful, that they'd created a good life from the wreckage of their worst loss. 6 months later, on October morning, almost exactly a year after he'd stopped to help a stranger in the street, Ethan stood before a conference room full of executives from companies interested in workplace culture transformation. Claire had asked him to present the model they'd developed, to share the results from their pilot projects, to convince these leaders that investing in human dignity was good for both people and profits. He was nervous, aware that a year ago he'd been a custodian pushing a mop, and now he was here, representing ideas that could reshape how organizations treated their workers. But when he began speaking, the words flowed naturally, drawing on theory and data, but grounded in lived experience. "A year ago, I was working 3 jobs to support my daughter," he began. "I was exhausted, financially precarious, and slowly being ground down by workplace cultures that treated me as a disposable resource. Then I made a choice that I thought would cost me everything. I stopped to help someone who needed it instead of protecting my own interests. That choice led me here, to a company that values integrity and demonstrates it through actual practice, not just mission statements." He saw heads nodding, saw the recognition in faces of people who understood the gap between stated values and operational reality. "What I learned in that journey is that workplace culture isn't about perks or ping-pong tables or casual Fridays. It's about whether your organization treats people as whole humans with lives and families and needs beyond their job descriptions. It's about whether you create conditions that allow people to do their best work, or conditions that force them to choose between professional success and human decency." The presentation continued for 45 minutes, data and stories interweaving to build a compelling case. When he finished, the room erupted in questions. Not skeptical challenges, but genuine interest in how to implement these practices in their own organizations. Afterward, Claire found him in the lobby. "That was exceptional. You've come so far from the nervous candidate who showed up 7 months late to his interview covered in blood." 13 months. It's been 13 months since that morning. 13 months that changed both our lives. Mine more subtly than yours, but changed nonetheless. Claire handed him a card with contact information for 3 of the executives who'd attended. "They want to hire us to transform their workplace cultures. You've just generated more business in one presentation than some directors do in a year." That evening, Ethan took Mia to Riverside Park, where they'd set up her telescope a year earlier. The October air was crisp, promising winter but not yet delivering it, and the sky was clear enough to see Jupiter rising in the east. "Can we look at Jupiter again?" Mia asked, already assembling the telescope with practiced efficiency. "I want to see if the moons are in the same position as last time." "They won't be. They orbit Jupiter just like we orbit the sun. They're always moving." "I know, but I want to see where they are now. Because last year when we looked, we were celebrating you getting the job. This year we're celebrating you being really good at it. It's like marking time by looking at the sky." They took turns at the eyepiece, watching the Galilean moons arranged in their current configuration around the gas giant. Different from last year, just as Mia had predicted. Everything moving, everything changing, the universe constant in its inconstancy. Daddy, do you think if you could go back to that morning and choose differently, would you? Mia asked, her eyes still pressed to the telescope. If you knew helping Ms. Morgan would lead to everything that happened, but you also knew you'd get the job anyway if you just went to the interview on time. That's a complicated question, sweetheart. I know. That's why I'm asking. Ethan thought about it seriously, honoring her question with the consideration it deserved. I don't think I'd change anything, because the choice to help her wasn't about the outcome. It was about who I wanted to be, what I wanted to demonstrate to you. If I'd walked past her to protect my interview, I might have gotten the job, but I'd have taught you that success matters more than helping people who need it, and that's not the lesson I want you to learn. So you chose right, even though you didn't know it would work out. Especially because I didn't know it would work out. That's what integrity means, doing right even when it costs you. Mia pulled back from the telescope and looked up at him, her face serious in the darkness. I want to be like that when I grow up. Someone who chooses right even when it's hard. You already are, sweetheart. You already are. They packed up the telescope and walked home through the neighborhood that had sustained them through the worst and celebrated with them through the best. Miguel waved from the bodega window. Mrs. Chen called out a greeting from her stoop. The community that had held them together when they were barely surviving welcomed them home now that they were thriving. In bed that night, Ethan reflected on the improbable journey from desperation to stability to meaningful work that helped others. None of it had been guaranteed. All of it had required choosing integrity over expedience, human dignity over professional calculation, doing right even when the cost was uncertain. And somehow, impossibly, it had worked. Not because the universe rewarded virtue, it didn't, not reliably, but because one person, Claire Morgan, had built something different. A company where values weren't marketing copy, but operational principles. Where helping a stranger didn't cost you everything, but revealed who you really were. Where that revelation could become opportunity instead of liability. His phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Thank you for today's presentation. You're changing how people think about workplace culture. Sarah would be proud. Ethan stared at the message, surprised Claire remembered his late wife's name, touched that she'd made the connection. He typed back, she would be proud of Mia. Everything I do is making sure our daughter grows up knowing that integrity matters more than success. You're succeeding at both. That's the real victory. Ethan set the phone aside and closed his eyes, letting himself feel the full weight of gratitude for how far they'd come. From survival to stability. From desperation to dignity. From one impossible choice on October morning to a life built on the principle that doing right mattered more than doing well, and the extraordinary discovery that sometimes, when you insisted on both, the universe found a way to deliver. One stranger, one choice, one moment of choosing humanity over opportunity. And everything had changed, not just for him, but for everyone he'd touched through the work he was doing now, spreading the model that had saved him to organizations and workers who desperately needed it. The best part wasn't his success, or even Mia's thriving, though both mattered deeply. The best part was knowing that the choice he'd made that October morning, the choice to stop, to help, to prioritize human need over personal advancement, was the same choice he'd make tomorrow and every day after. Because that's what integrity meant. Not a single dramatic gesture, but the accumulation of small choices, day after day, to be the person you wanted to be regardless of whether anyone was watching or rewarding you for it. He'd built a life on that foundation, and now he was helping others build the same. That was enough. More than enough. That was everything.